My name's Tyler, I'm 29, and I never thought I'd end up in a courtroom with my own father shouting across the aisle that I was too irresponsible to handle money. If you had told me a decade ago that we'd be standing in front of a judge arguing about finances like bitter rivals instead of family, I would have laughed. But that's the thing about family. You never think it'll be your own blood trying to cut you down until the knife is already in your back. Growing up, my dad made it very clear what he thought of me. I wasn't the golden child. That was my older brother, Matt. Matt was the one who got new cars, private lessons, trips abroad, the one my dad proudly introduced at dinner parties. Me? I was the quiet one, the dreamer, the kid who liked books more than sports, and apparently that made me a disappointment. My dad never said it directly when I was a kid, but I could hear it in the way he praised Matt endlessly and barely acknowledged me. When I tried to bring up my interests, finance, investing, numbers that fascinated me more than anything else, he would wave me off with a chuckle and say, "Tyler, you're too soft for that world. You'll just get chewed up." By the time I was a teenager, I had already learned not to expect fairness. Matt got into a good college with my dad's full support. I had to scrape together scholarships, loans, and part-time jobs just to afford mine. I didn't complain. I figured I'd prove myself on my own. And that became a kind of mantra for me. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of approval. I would make it on my own terms. College was rough, but I excelled. I threw myself into finance, research, late-night study groups, internships where I fetched coffee while also devouring every spreadsheet I could get my hands on. By the time I graduated, I had a job lined up at an investment firm that most of my peers would have killed for. But even then, my dad didn't care. I still remember calling him after I got the offer. "That's nice," he said flatly. "But you should really think about something more stable. Those firms chew up young people and spit them out." I could feel the bitterness growing inside me over the years, but I tried to bury it. I focused on work. Slowly, I built a reputation. I got promoted. I managed bigger accounts. My world started to expand, and eventually, I got the chance to run a large investment fund. Today, that fund manages over $50 million. It's not just money. It's trust, responsibility, years of effort. And I don't say this to brag, but to show the irony of what would later unfold. Because even with everything I achieved, my father never saw me as capable. Family gatherings became unbearable. My dad would toast to Matt's new promotion, Matt's new car, Matt's new house, while sneaking little digs at me. "Don't blow all your money on silly things, Tyler. Or, maybe one day you'll catch up to your brother." I'd sit there quietly, reminding myself that I didn't need his validation. Still, it stung. Things came to a breaking point after my grandfather passed away. He left behind a sizable estate, and there were complications about the will. To my surprise, I had been given a significant role in the inheritance distribution, probably because my grandfather, unlike my dad, had always believed in me. He used to tell me, "You see things differently, Tyler. Don't let anyone convince you that's a weakness." My dad hated that. When the estate proceedings started, my father made it his mission to undermine me at every turn. He claimed I couldn't be trusted with handling finances. He told relatives that I was reckless, that I would squander everything. At first, I ignored it. But when legal documents started to arrive, challenging my ability to oversee the portion of the estate tied to me, I realized he was taking it to court. The day of the hearing is burned into my mind. Sitting there, watching him on the opposite side, arms crossed, smirking like he finally had the upper hand. He spoke with such certainty, painting me as some kind of irresponsible fool. "Your Honor, Tyler has never been able to handle money properly. He doesn't have the discipline, the sense of responsibility. I love my son, but the truth is he's just not capable." His words hit like blows, even though I had heard variations of them my whole life. Hearing them in a courtroom, officially recorded, was something else entirely. I clenched my fists under the table, trying not to show how much it hurt. I wanted to shout back, to list every late night, every deal I had closed, every sleepless week where I held entire portfolios together while others buckled under pressure. But I stayed quiet. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Just wait." The judge flipped through the files. My lawyer had submitted my professional background, my current position, and the performance of the fund I managed. When the judge looked up, her expression was unreadable. Then she said the words that froze the entire room. "According to these records, Mr. Tyler manages a $50 million fund. Is that correct?" The courtroom shifted. People murmured. My dad blinked, visibly thrown off. He stumbled back slightly as if the words had physically struck him. For the first time in my life, I saw his confidence falter. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I sat there, heart pounding, watching the cracks appear in the image my father had built of me all these years. The judge's voice cut through the silence again. That doesn't seem irresponsible to me. In fact, it suggests quite the opposite. The murmurs grew louder. My dad's lawyer shuffled his papers nervously. My brother Matt shifted uncomfortably in his seat. And me? I sat still, but inside, something shifted. For years, I had swallowed his insults, his dismissals, his constant comparisons. But in that moment, I realized the power dynamic was starting to change. And that's where things really started to unravel. Because my dad wasn't about to let his carefully crafted version of reality collapse without a fight. The silence in that courtroom didn't last long. My dad had always been a master at talking his way out of uncomfortable moments, and I could see the gears turning in his head as he tried to recover from the judge's revelation. He cleared his throat, plastered on a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "Well, Your Honor, managing numbers on paper is one thing. Real life is another. Tyler may look responsible on the surface, but I assure you, when it comes to family obligations, he has always failed." It was subtle, but he was shifting the ground beneath us. He wasn't just attacking my professional reputation anymore. He was aiming at something much more personal, my role within the family. The judge raised an eyebrow, but didn't say much. My father's lawyer picked up the cue immediately and began emphasizing character over financial expertise. "Yes, Your Honor, Tyler may have impressive credentials," his lawyer said, his tone almost mocking. "But let's not forget, this is not about managing clients or investments. This is about handling a family legacy. And we have grave concerns about his ability to honor that responsibility." I wanted to laugh at the hypocrisy. Here was my father, the man who had once emptied out my college savings to pay for Matt's tuition shortfall, lecturing about family responsibility. But instead of laughing, I just sat there, swallowing the anger, because I knew we weren't anywhere near the end of this fight. After the hearing was postponed for further review, things at home took a sharp turn for the worse. My phone lit up constantly with calls from relatives. My aunt, who had always been a mediator, called me late one evening and sighed. "Tyler, your dad is saying you're trying to cut him out. He's telling people you're planning to sell the estate and pocket the money." I almost dropped the phone. "What? That's ridiculous. I haven't even." I know. She cut me off quickly. "But people listen to him. You know how your dad is." And she was right. My dad had a way of spinning stories that made people question their own memories. Before long, I noticed the subtle shift in family dynamics. Cousins who used to chat with me at gatherings now avoided eye contact. A few even unfriended me on social media. My brother Matt, of course, played along. He sent me a smug text one night. "Maybe you should just let Dad handle things. He knows what he's doing." I didn't reply, but that message burned in my chest for days. Matt had always enjoyed being Dad's shadow, the chosen one, the one who could do no wrong. Now he was clearly enjoying watching me squirm. The next family dinner was when things really came to a head. I showed up out of obligation, thinking maybe I could smooth things over. Instead, I walked straight into an ambush. The moment I stepped through the door, the conversation fell silent. My mom gave me a tight smile, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. My dad leaned back in his chair, arms folded, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Well," he said casually, "look who decided to show up. The big investor himself." Laughter rippled around the table, though I could tell it was forced. My brother smirked and muttered, "Careful, he might try to buy dinner with imaginary money." I froze, gripping the back of my chair. Imaginary money? What are you even talking about? My dad leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Oh, come on, Tyler. Everyone knows these so-called funds are smoke and mirrors. Numbers on a screen. One bad week and poof, it's all gone. That's not stability. That's gambling with other people's money. And you want us to trust you with our inheritance?" My chest tightened. The words weren't just meant to humiliate me. They were meant to undermine every ounce of credibility I had worked for. And worse, he was doing it in front of people I grew up with, people whose opinions I still cared about, no matter how much I tried not to. Dinner carried on with snide remarks slipped in every few minutes. Matt brought up my old car breaking down in college. turning it into a joke about how I couldn't even manage a used Honda, but now he wants to manage millions. My dad chuckled and added, "Exactly. History repeats itself." I sat there in silence, picking at my food, forcing myself not to explode. Inside, though, something was shifting. The anger that I had bottled up for years was starting to harden into something sharper. Not just frustration, but determination. Because as much as my dad thought he controlled the narrative, I knew something he didn't. I wasn't the same kid he used to mock. I had leverage now. Resources, connections, knowledge. And while he was busy painting me as the irresponsible one, I was already learning how to turn the tide in ways he wouldn't see coming. But that night, I kept my mouth shut. I let him have his little show. Because deep down, I was starting to realize that letting him underestimate me might just be the key to everything. And sure enough, the next move he made only pushed me further toward that breaking point. I didn't think my dad could push me any further than he already had. But I was wrong. Looking back, I should have seen the betrayal coming. My father wasn't satisfied with mocking me at dinners or spreading lies to relatives. He needed to control the narrative completely. And when words weren't enough, he decided to act. It started subtly. I got a call from the bank one Tuesday morning. The woman on the line sounded polite but confused. "Mr. Reynolds? We just wanted to confirm. Are you authorizing the request to transfer oversight of the family trust account to your father?" I nearly dropped my phone. "What request?" She hesitated. "We received documentation yesterday with signatures. One of them appears to be yours." My pulse spiked. "That's impossible. I didn't sign anything." She lowered her voice. "Then I suggest you review this quickly, because if we hadn't flagged a discrepancy with the paperwork, it might have already gone through." I drove straight to the bank. They handed me a copy of the paperwork, and my stomach dropped. There it was, a document supposedly signed by me, giving my father authority over part of the estate tied to my name. The signature wasn't mine. It was a forgery. I stared at the page, numb. My dad had actually forged my name. He had taken my identity, my own handwriting, and tried to use it against me. When I confronted him later that evening, he didn't even flinch. We were in his study, just the two of us, the smell of his cigar smoke filling the air. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers like he was in control of a chess game. "You think you're ready for this responsibility, Tyler?" he said coolly. "You're not. You're playing with fire, and I won't let you burn this family down. Sometimes a man has to take matters into his own hands." My voice shook with rage. "You forged my signature. You tried to steal what isn't yours." He tilted his head and smirked. "Steal? No. Protect. You don't know what you're doing. You've always been reckless. I'm saving you from yourself." I slammed my hand on the desk, the papers rattling under my palm. "You're not saving me. You're destroying me. Do you even hear yourself?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "One day, you'll thank me. But until then, you'll play the role I tell you to play." It was like being hit with a wall of cold water. That wasn't just arrogance. That was control. He didn't just want the money. He wanted me under his thumb, forever the son who couldn't stand without him. For days, I couldn't think straight. I'd lie awake at night, replaying his words, feeling like I had no ground beneath my feet. If he was willing to forge my name, what else would he do? Who else would he convince that I was incompetent or unstable? The fallout was immediate. Somehow, word spread among the family that I had panicked and tried to sign away my part of the estate, only to regret it afterward. At the next gathering, I walked in and felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Whispers followed me from room to room. My cousin pulled me aside and asked, "Are you okay? People are saying you had some kind of breakdown." A breakdown. That was the story now. My dad wasn't just attacking my responsibility. He was going after my sanity. And the worst part? People believed him. Even Matt got in on it. He cornered me in the hallway with that same smug grin. "You know, Dad's right. Maybe it's for the best. You've got a lot on your plate with your little fund. Why not let him handle the serious stuff?" I wanted to punch him. Instead, I just walked away. Because deep down, I knew that reacting in anger would only prove their point. But something shifted in me after that betrayal. The weight of all those years, being ignored, mocked, dismissed, crystallized into something sharper. For the first time, I wasn't just angry. I was determined. My father had crossed a line he could never uncross. I wasn't going to let this stand. I couldn't. And yet, even as I resolved to fight back, I didn't realize just how far he was willing to go next. After discovering the forged documents, I thought the worst was behind me. I figured exposing them would be enough to stop my father in his tracks, maybe even shame him into backing down. But instead, it felt like the ground kept shifting under me, pulling me deeper into a pit I couldn't climb out of. The whispers my father planted in the family spread like wildfire. Suddenly, I was unstable. I was the son who had snapped under pressure and couldn't be trusted with big decisions. At first, I brushed it off as just gossip, but then it started to seep into places I never expected. One afternoon, I got called into my firm's compliance office. The head of the department, a sharp woman named Patel who I had worked with for years, looked at me with a mix of concern and caution. "Tyler, we've received some inquiries. Anonymous tips questioning whether you're in a sound state to be managing client portfolios. I need to ask you directly, are you under any personal stress that could affect your performance?" The blood drained from my face. "What? No. My record speaks for itself." She tapped a folder on her desk. "I believe you. But perception matters in our business. Whoever is making these claims is persistent. They've sent multiple letters. I'd advise you to tread carefully, both professionally and personally." I left her office numb. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. My dad had taken his attacks beyond the family and into my career. He wasn't just trying to take the estate anymore. He was trying to strip me of everything I had built. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, staring at the city skyline. The glow of the buildings outside usually gave me comfort, a reminder of how far I'd come since those days of scraping by in college. But now all I felt was exhaustion. The weight of carrying not just my work, but the lies my father had wrapped around me like chains was suffocating. I stopped going to family dinners, stopped answering calls from relatives. Even my mom's soft-voiced, "Please, Tyler, just talk to your father," felt hollow. I knew she wanted peace, but peace wasn't possible anymore. Every conversation ended with him twisting reality until I was the villain. The lowest point came when I overheard two colleagues whispering in the break room. "Isn't he the one whose own dad tried to keep him away from money? I heard there was some incident with a trust." The other laughed. "Imagine managing millions at work, but your own family doesn't trust you." I stood frozen outside the door, my stomach sinking. I had worked for years to build a reputation as sharp, reliable, steady, and in a matter of months, my father had poisoned it. For a while, I considered just walking away, letting him have the estate, the control, everything he thought he deserved. I told myself I didn't need it. I had my career, my independence. Maybe that was enough. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. If I let him win, it would mean accepting the version of me he had crafted all my life. The weak one, the reckless one, the failure. And I couldn't let that stand. Not anymore. So I started small. Quietly. I began documenting everything. Every forged paper, every rumor I could trace, every slip in his stories. I spoke to the bank manager privately, gathering statements about the attempted transfer. I even hired a handwriting expert to analyze the forged signature, just in case I needed hard proof in court. But I didn't move yet. On the surface, I stayed quiet, almost defeated, letting him think he had broken me. At family gatherings I skipped, I knew he was parading that silence as proof of my guilt. Let him. I realized the more he believed I was crushed, the less he would see what I was building underneath. Because in those quiet, sleepless nights, as I sat at my desk with documents spread out around me, I started to see the outlines of something bigger. Not just defense, but offense. A way to turn his manipulations against him. A way to make sure, once and for all, that when the truth came out, there would be no crawling back from it. But at that stage, I wasn't ready to act. I was still deep in the pit, carrying the weight of betrayal and humiliation. It was my rock bottom. Yet in that darkness, a small spark of something else flickered, a plan forming, sharp and patient. And my father had no idea that the son he dismissed as weak was preparing to strike back harder than he ever imagined. Rock bottom has a strange way of reshaping you. For weeks after the forgery incident, I felt hollow, like the person I'd built myself into, confident, competent, respected, had been stripped away by whispers and lies. But the thing about being at the bottom is that there's nowhere left to fall. Slowly, I realized I had two options: surrender and let my father's version of me win, or claw my way back up and build something so undeniable that even he couldn't twist it. So I started climbing. The first step was my work. I doubled down, not just to survive, but to prove, to myself as much as to others, that I could withstand the storm. I began staying later, working smarter, refining strategies until they sparkled. A risky investment I had been watching for months finally paid off, delivering a return that turned heads not just in my firm, but across the industry. Clients began to notice. Word spread. Patel, the compliance officer who had once sat me down with those skeptical questions, called me into her office again, this time with a different tone. "Tyler," she said, folding her hands over a stack of reports, "whatever's going on in your personal life, you've handled yourself with remarkable professionalism. The board has noticed. They want to increase your portfolio size." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Increase?" She smiled faintly. "You'll be overseeing an additional 20 million. I walked out of that office with my chest tight, not from anxiety this time, but from a deep, steady resolve. While my father had been trying to drag me down, I was climbing higher. And the higher I climbed, the less ground his lies had to stand on. The second step was personal. I stopped isolating myself. I reached out to people who truly believed in me, mentors from college, old friends who had watched me hustle from nothing. I didn't tell them everything, but I surrounded myself with people who reminded me that I wasn't the caricature my father painted. One mentor in particular, Mr. Alvarez, a retired hedge fund manager, gave me advice over coffee one Saturday. "Your father's fighting you with shadows," he said, his weathered hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "Whispers, rumors. You can't fight shadows head-on. You shine a light so bright they can't exist." That phrase stuck with me. Shine a light. And so, I began doing just that. I accepted invitations to panels and industry events I'd once avoided out of shyness. I started publishing articles in financial journals, sharing strategies that gained traction online. Slowly, my name wasn't just connected to the whispers about family drama. It was connected to expertise, innovation, results. Meanwhile, I kept building my quiet arsenal. Every false claim my father made, I tracked. Every lie, every exaggeration, I recorded. I had the bank statements proving he attempted to transfer my accounts. I had the handwriting experts report on the forgery. And when my cousin, who had initially believed my dad's rumors, overheard him bragging at a party about keeping Tyler in his place, she called me the next morning in tears. "I didn't realize how far he was going, Ty. I'm sorry. I should have trusted you." I told her it was okay, but her story went straight into my growing file of evidence. By the time spring rolled around, my life looked different. I had more responsibility at work, stronger allies outside of my family, and a thicker skin than I'd ever had before. And while my dad was still whispering about me at gatherings I didn't attend, I noticed cracks forming in his control. A few relatives began reaching out quietly, asking my side of the story. One uncle even said, "You know, your father talks a lot, but I can't deny what you've accomplished. Keep at it, kid." I realized something crucial. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving my father's attacks. I was gaining ground. The man who had always cast me as weak was watching from a distance as I rose higher than he ever expected. But I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in his face. Outwardly, I kept calm, professional, even detached. Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was gathering the leverage I'd need to make sure, when the time came, my father's lies wouldn't just collapse. They would collapse in a way so public, so undeniable, that there would be no recovering from it. And sure enough, the opportunity for that strike was coming. I could feel it like static in the air, the moment when everything would shift and my father would finally face the truth he had spent years trying to bury. It was almost eerie how things began to align once I stopped playing defense and started thinking several moves ahead, like a chess match where my father had been so busy mocking my pawns that he never noticed I'd been developing a queen. The turning point came when I received a call from the estate attorney, Mr. Green. He was one of those men who spoke slowly, weighing every word, with a voice that carried both authority and fatigue from decades of dealing with family disputes like mine. "Tyler," he said one afternoon, "I think you should know something. Your father has been pushing aggressively to alter certain aspects of the estate distribution. He insists it's in the family's best interest. But I've also seen the reports about your career, and frankly, I'm not convinced by his arguments." I leaned forward in my chair, heart pounding. What kind of changes is he trying to make? Green hesitated before answering. He wants to consolidate decision-making power into his hands. Essentially, he's lobbying to become the sole trustee of certain assets. If successful, he would have sweeping authority. And Tyler, he's been trying to discredit you to make his case stronger. There it was. Confirmation. Not just whispers, not just rumors, hard evidence of his endgame. I thanked Green, and after the call ended, I sat in silence, staring out the window at the city lights. My father wasn't simply trying to embarrass me or tarnish my reputation. He wanted absolute control, and he was willing to destroy me to get it. But Green's call wasn't just a warning, it was a gift. Because in that moment, I realized something. The more my father pushed, the more reckless he became. He was so desperate to secure power that he wasn't careful about the trail he left behind. And trails, I knew how to follow. I reached out to a contact from my industry, a journalist who specialized in finance and estate law. We had spoken casually at networking events before, but now I gave her a few carefully chosen hints. Nothing incriminating yet, just a breadcrumb trail. Families sometimes fight dirty over estates. Ever seen a case where someone forges documents? Her eyes lit up immediately. All the time. Those stories always get traction. I didn't give her mine, at least, not yet. But I knew I was planting seeds. If things escalated, I had someone ready to shine a light. Meanwhile, I strengthened my position at work. Another big win with my portfolio cemented my reputation further. My name started circulating not just locally, but nationally in certain circles. A magazine even reached out for an interview about young fund managers to watch. I nearly declined. Humility had always been my shield. But then I thought of my father, spinning his narrative at the dinner table, and I agreed. The feature was small, but it was public proof of my competence. Proof no whispered rumor could erase. The real breakthrough, though, came through Matt. For all his smugness, my brother had inherited one trait from Dad: arrogance. And arrogance breeds carelessness. One night, while out for drinks with mutual acquaintances, Matt bragged about how Dad has this all wrapped up and how soon Tyler won't have a leg to stand on. What he didn't realize was that one of the people at the table was a friend of mine from college. She texted me later. He basically admitted they forged stuff. Said you'd never prove it. Thought you should know. I froze when I read it. Matt had confirmed what I suspected, out loud, to witnesses. That was more than carelessness. That was leverage. From that point on, my quiet plan gained sharper edges. I gathered my files into a single organized binder: bank statements, expert reports, written accounts from family members who had overheard my dad's boasts, and now, a witness statement from my friend about Matt's drunken slip. Piece by piece, it was becoming undeniable. And yet, I didn't move. Not yet. I kept my composure in public, let my father believe I was still the one cornered. Because the beauty of setups is timing. Strike too early, and you tip your hand. But strike at the right moment, and everything collapses at once. The estate attorney scheduled another court session to review my father's proposed changes. I knew then that this was where it would all come to a head. He would walk in confident, armed with his usual bluster, ready to frame me as unstable. But this time, I wasn't coming in empty-handed. For the first time in years, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. I had been mocked, betrayed, dragged through the mud, but in the process, I had become sharper, stronger, harder to break. My father still thought of me as the boy he could control. What he didn't see was that I had grown into someone who could play the game better than he ever imagined. And as that court date approached, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the time came, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would end his narrative, once and for all. The morning of the next court session, I woke up earlier than usual. The city outside my window was still quiet, the streets wet from a night rain, and for once I didn't feel the usual storm of anxiety in my chest. There was no shaking, no second-guessing, just a steady calm, the kind that comes when you know you've prepared every last detail and all that's left is to execute. I slipped the binder of documents into my briefcase, every forgery, every statement, every proof carefully arranged in order, and headed out. On the way, I thought about my father, probably sitting smugly at his breakfast table, rehearsing the same old lines about my instability and irresponsibility. He had no idea the ground was about to give way beneath him. When I entered the courtroom, I saw him immediately. He was standing tall, shaking hands with relatives who had come to support him. Matt hovered nearby, smirking like he'd already won. My mom sat stiffly in the back, her eyes darting between us, clearly torn but unwilling to speak against my father. I sat down calmly beside my attorney, placing the binder neatly on the table. My father noticed it and raised an eyebrow, then smirked as if to say, "You brought homework?" I didn't react. The session began, and as expected, my father launched into his performance. He painted me as unfit to handle the estate, emphasizing incidents where I had supposedly panicked, repeating the story about me trying to sign away my part of the inheritance. His lawyer backed him up, nodding gravely as if each word was undeniable truth. I stayed silent, hands folded, letting him dig deeper. Finally, the judge turned to me. "Mr. Reynolds, do you have a response?" I stood slowly, opened the binder, and slid the first document forward. "Yes, Your Honor. My father has repeatedly claimed that I attempted to relinquish my portion of the estate. Here is a copy of the document he submitted to the bank. And here, I placed another sheet beside it, is a forensic handwriting analysis proving the signature is forged. The signature does not match mine, but it does show patterns consistent with my father's handwriting." The courtroom rippled with whispers. My father's confident smile faltered for just a second. I turned a page. Additionally, here are statements from the bank manager confirming that my father attempted to authorize the transfer. They flagged it precisely because they suspected irregularities. More whispers. The judge leaned forward, studying the pages carefully. My father's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, flipping through his own folder as if trying to find a rebuttal that didn't exist. And I continued, my voice steady. Here is a witness statement from a relative who overheard my father bragging about keeping me in my place. And another from someone who heard my brother, Matt, admit that documents were forged. These are signed, dated, and notarized. At that, Matt's face drained of color. He leaned toward my father, whispering frantically, but my dad's jaw was set in stone. The judge looked up. "Mr. Reynolds Sr., do you have an explanation for this?" My father opened his mouth, but for once, the words didn't flow. He stammered, tried to redirect, but every attempt sounded hollow against the stack of evidence laid bare on the table. The room that had once swallowed his every word now looked at him with suspicion. And that's when I delivered the final blow. I pulled out a small magazine clipping. My recent interview, headlined, "Young Fund Manager Expands Portfolio to $70 million. I placed it on top of the pile. "Your Honor, my father has argued repeatedly that I am irresponsible and unfit to manage finances. Yet I currently oversee $70 million in client assets, documented publicly. If I am trusted with that, I see no reason why I cannot be trusted with my rightful portion of my grandfather's estate." The silence that followed was electric. Relatives who had once whispered about my supposed instability now stared at me with wide eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. My mom covered her mouth, tears welling, while Matt looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But it was my father's face that I will never forget. That mask of control he had worn my entire life cracked wide open. His eyes narrowed, his lips twitched, and for the first time, he looked small. Not powerful, not commanding, just a man who had built his world on lies and was watching it crumble in front of everyone. The judge leaned back, folding her hands. "It appears, Mr. Reynolds, that your son is not the irresponsible party here." I sat down slowly, my hands steady on the table, my binder closed. For years, I had dreamed of a moment like this, not out of spite, but out of the desperate need to be seen for who I really was, not who my father said I was. And now, the truth was in the open. But this wasn't over yet. The session was still ongoing, and the fallout from that evidence had only just begun to unfold. The silence in the courtroom stretched, heavy and suffocating. My father's bluster was gone, replaced by the hollow echo of his own lies. The judge's gavel came down once, sharp and final. Given the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Tyler Reynolds has been the subject of deliberate attempts to discredit and defraud him. The court not only rejects the petition to strip him of his inheritance rights, but will be referring the matter of forged documents to the district attorney's office for review. The words hung in the air. My father's face turned ashen, the bravado he had worn for decades finally stripped away. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but Dad just stared at the table as if it might open and swallow him whole. Matt, for once, had no smirk. His jaw clenched, eyes darting nervously between me and the judge. He knew what was coming. If Dad went down for forgery, Matt's drunken brag would make him complicit. The judge continued. This court finds that Mr. Tyler Reynolds is fully capable of managing his portion of the estate. Further, given his professional qualifications and the troubling actions of Mr. Reynolds Sr., we see no reason he should not serve in a greater fiduciary role. Effective immediately, Tyler Reynolds will be named co-trustee of the estate alongside the court-appointed executor. A gasp ran through the room. My father's head snapped up, his eyes burning with disbelief. For years, he had worked to keep me in his shadow, and in the span of a few minutes, he had not only lost control, but watched it handed to me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply nodded, thanked the judge, and closed my binder. As court adjourned, my father tried one last desperate play. He grabbed my arm in the hallway, his grip surprisingly weak. Tyler, listen to me. We don't have to do this. We're family. We can fix this before it gets worse. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. Not as the looming figure who had defined my childhood, but as a man who had gambled everything on control and lost. No, I said quietly. You taught me my whole life that I wasn't enough, that I was weak. But today, you proved something. The only weakness in this family is your inability to let go of power. That's not my burden to carry anymore. It's yours. I walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift. The district attorney opened an investigation into the forgery. Whispers that once tore down my reputation now swirled around my father instead. Relatives who had avoided me began calling, apologizing, trying to reconcile. My mom visited me one evening, tears streaming down her face. I should have stood up sooner, she whispered. I hugged her, but I didn't offer false comfort. Some wounds take time to heal. Matt, stripped of Dad's protection, floundered. His career, always buoyed by family connections, began to crumble as people distanced themselves from the scandal. He sent me a text once. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't reply. At work, my name carried even more weight now, not because of the estate, but because I had weathered the storm without breaking. Patel stopped me in the hallway one morning and said, I don't know the details of what happened, Tyler, but whatever it was, you handled it better than most people could. That kind of resilience is rare. And she was right. The storm hadn't broken me. It had forged me. Months later, when the estate was finally settled, I visited my grandfather's old house, now officially under my care. I walked through the quiet rooms, remembering his voice. Don't let anyone convince you that seeing things differently is a weakness. I stood by the window, looking out over the garden, and felt the weight of it all lift. My father had tried to chain me to his vision of who I was. Instead, he had set the stage for me to prove who I really was, not just to him, but to everyone, including myself. And as I closed the door behind me that evening, I realized something. Revenge hadn't been about humiliating him. It had been about reclaiming myself. My father lost everything he had tried to hold on to. I didn't need to take it from him. He destroyed it with his own hands. And me? I walked away with more than money or power. I walked away free. Thanksgiving's always been a weird holiday for me. Not bad, not great, just weird. I guess when you grow up in a family that treats love like a ration meal, you get used to faking smiles over turkey and pretending everything's fine. But this year was different. This year broke something in me. My name's Trevor. I'm 19 now, first year of college. Or I was supposed to be. I'll get to that. I've always been the quiet kid in the family. Not shy, just observant. My older sister, Brooke, was the golden child. Straight A student, cheer captain, did one semester of college before dropping out to pursue motherhood with a guy who worked the night shift at a vape store. Our parents called it a noble choice. I called it Brooke being Brooke. She now has 3 kids, lives 10 minutes from my parents, and somehow still gets treated like she's curing cancer while I'm expected to be grateful for leftover scraps of attention. Growing up, it was always about her. Every family vacation, tailored around what Brooke wanted. Every holiday, Brooke's schedule. Every argument, I was told to back down because she had more on her plate. And every time I tried to speak up, my mom would tilt her head and say, "Don't be difficult, Trevor. Your sister needs us more right now." But I dealt with it. I kept my head down, worked hard, and got accepted into a pretty decent university. It wasn't Ivy League, but it was solid, and more importantly, it was mine. I had plans. I wanted to major in biomedical engineering. I had been working after school and summer since I was 14, but let's be honest, tuition is steep. The only reason college was even on the table was because of Grandpa's fund. Grandpa was one of the only family members who saw me. Not just looked at me, but saw me. My mom's dad, a retired mechanic with hands like sandpaper and a voice that could quiet a room without shouting. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. He used to sit me down in the garage and teach me how to fix things. Not just engines or tools, he taught me how to think. And when I was 16, he pulled me aside during a cookout, handed me a warm soda, and said, "I started a fund for you. Been putting money in it since you were born. Don't tell your parents yet. Just know it's there when you need it." I remember holding that can like it was gold. So when I got accepted into college, I told my parents about the fund. They didn't say much. My mom nodded and said, "That's sweet of your grandfather." My dad gave a non-committal grunt. I figured that was the end of it. A week later, Grandpa called me and said the fund had been transferred to a joint custodial account, with my parents' names on it, too. "Just legal formality," he muttered. "They won't touch it." Spoiler, they did. But I didn't know that yet. Summer came and went, and I kept getting delayed updates about the financial paperwork. My mom said she was sorting out FAFSA stuff, and my dad told me to just be patient. I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? This was my future. They wouldn't lie about this. Orientation week rolled around, and I still hadn't paid tuition. I kept calling the registrar's office, emailing, refreshing portals, nothing. Finally, the university sent me a notification I'd been withdrawn due to non-payment. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Then I marched downstairs with my laptop and showed it to my mom. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, honey," she said, spooning yogurt into a bowl. "Yeah, about that. We needed to have a talk." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" She set the bowl down and gave me this look, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Your sister's kids needed help, Trevor. She's raising 3 children, and they've been struggling. The oldest needs therapy, and the twins are in daycare. We used the money to help with that." I didn't say anything. Then my dad chimed in from the living room, not even looking away from the TV. "It's not like you were going anywhere, kid. Be real. College isn't for everyone." I couldn't breathe. Not from rage, just from the shock of it all. I thought it had to be a joke, or maybe a temporary loan. But when I asked them if there was any money left, my mom said, "We did what was best for the family." The rest of the week was a blur. I didn't leave my room. Didn't eat. Didn't sleep. I didn't even tell Grandpa. I was ashamed, and, honestly, I was scared of what he'd say. Maybe he'd side with them. Maybe he'd say, "Family first," like they always did. But then Thanksgiving came. I almost didn't go. I was 2 days deep into a job stocking shelves at a hardware store, trying to earn something while figuring out what the hell to do next. But Grandpa called and said he'd made apple pie, just like he used to when I was a kid, and I couldn't say no to that. So I went. Dressed nice. Brought sparkling cider. Smiled when my sister's kids screamed, and climbed over everything like gremlins on sugar highs. I shook my dad's hand, hugged my mom, nodded politely to my sister and her dead-eyed husband. I even helped set the table. We sat down to eat. Grandpa was at the far end, carving the turkey like some ancient king overseeing a feast. My sister talked nonstop about her kids' milestones. My parents fawned over every sentence. I just passed plates and chewed quietly. And then, as Mom ladled gravy onto mashed potatoes, she said it. She looked straight at me and said, "We used your college fund to help your sister's kids. They deserved it more." I froze. Everyone else kept eating. My dad snorted and added, "It's not like you were going anywhere." That's when I saw Grandpa's hand pause. Just for a second. He slowly set the carving knife down. His face didn't move, but his eyes looked sharper than I'd ever seen them. He pushed his chair back with a slow scrape against the tile and stood up. The room quieted. Forks clinked to a stop. Even Brooke stopped talking. Then Grandpa said, calm as anything, "Funny, because I left that money in Trevor's name." And the room went silent. No one said a word. My mom blinked like she'd been slapped. My dad suddenly found his peas real interesting. Brooke's jaw twitched. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring down at my plate, trying to decide whether I was about to cry or laugh. But Grandpa wasn't done. He looked at me, then back at them, and said, there was a silence that felt like it bent time itself. Grandpa's voice had sliced clean through the gravy-thick awkwardness. For a moment, nobody moved. My mom's hand hovered midair, still gripping the gravy ladle. My sister's husband coughed once into his napkin and avoided everyone's eyes. One of the twins dropped a roll onto the floor, and the soft thud sounded like a cannon going off. And Grandpa, he just stood there, his palms pressed flat on the table, his gaze flicking between my parents like he was reading an open book he'd already memorized. "Trevor," he said, not looking at me, "how much of that account did you see?" I blinked. My throat was dry. I never got access, I managed. They said they were working on it. Grandpa muttered, and his jaw tightened. "And your tuition?" "Withdrawn. Non-payment." My mom let out a nervous little chuckle, one of those laughs people make when they're trying to claw back control. "Dad, come on. Don't make this a whole thing. It's not like we stole it. It was just sitting there, and Brooke needed help. The kids." "Stop." Grandpa's voice was low, but final. My mom shut up instantly. He looked at me then. "I named that fund after you. It's been in your name since the day you were born. I only added your parents for legal reasons. Never thought I'd have to babysit grown adults." Brooke finally spoke. "Can we not do this now? It's Thanksgiving. And Trevor, seriously, you don't even like college. You told me last year you weren't sure about going." "That's not what I said," I replied quietly. "I said I wasn't sure where I wanted to go yet. But I was going." Dad leaned back in his chair with a sigh, like this was all beneath him. "Look, it's done. The money's gone. You think this family doesn't make sacrifices for you too, kid? Your sister needed help. What were we supposed to do? Let the kids suffer while you play scientist?" And there it was. That's what it always came down to. Brooke's kids were tangible, loud, present, needy. My dreams were invisible, easy to ignore, easy to minimize. Grandpa sat back down slowly, his plate untouched. He didn't say another word that night, and neither did I. The weeks after Thanksgiving were some of the loneliest of my life. The silence wasn't just from me. It was from Grandpa, too. I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, but something shifted. When I called him a few days later, he answered in short phrases. "Working on something," he said. "Be patient." Meanwhile, things at home got colder. I tried not to pick fights, but every interaction with my parents felt like a minefield. They acted like I was the problem, like I was punishing them for being good people. "You're sulking," my mom snapped one afternoon when I didn't answer her about dinner plans. "I'm thinking," I said. "You're being ungrateful." I didn't respond. I couldn't, because if I opened my mouth, I didn't know what would come out. And my sister? Brooke acted like nothing had happened. She texted me a few times with TikToks and memes like we were best friends. At one point she asked if I could help her set up her kids' Christmas gifts. I didn't even reply. Then Grandpa called me the week before Christmas and asked if I'd stop by. Alone. His place was quieter than I remembered, quieter than usual. The walls were lined with old photos, dusty toolboxes, and faded calendars. He poured me a mug of coffee and sat me down at the kitchen table like we used to do when I was 10 and learning to patch up a bike tire. Then he handed me a folder. "Read it." Inside were photocopies of bank statements, transaction logs, and a printout of a college savings plan, one with my full name on it. There were dozens of entries labeled auto deposit, monthly, going back nearly 2 decades. Then, abruptly, a single withdrawal, $62,000. Brooke's name was in the memo line. "I didn't even know they could access this without telling you," I said, my hands shaking. "They shouldn't have been able to," Grandpa muttered. "But the way I set it up, they technically had power of attorney while you were still a minor. And your mother requested an early disbursement for medical expenses 2 weeks after your 18th birthday. But that's illegal. It's gray," he said, and tapped the folder. "I've been talking to some people. But more than that, what gets me is the lying. They didn't even tell me. Your mom forged a letter. Said you approved it." I felt like I was going to throw up. "They always do this," I said. "They always say it's for the good of the family, but it's really just for Brooke. I don't matter to them. Not unless I'm useful." Grandpa looked at me hard. "You matter to me. You always have." I nodded, but I didn't believe it. Not yet. Not fully. Then he slid a key across the table. "What's this?" "Garage. Bottom drawer of the red toolbox." "Open the envelope." That night, I found the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "If you ever need to disappear for a while, use this." Folded inside was a check for $5,000. Cashable. No strings. And below that, A short list of job postings, engineering internships, remote apprenticeships, even a contact name at a startup in Oregon. I sat there for hours, just reading that note over and over again. But the thing was, I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to fight. Christmas was the next storm. I knew it would be. And maybe I should have stayed home or ghosted everyone like I originally planned. But something in me needed to see it. Needed to witness it one more time before I made my move. Brooke showed up in a brand new SUV, one I later learned had been co-signed by my dad. Her kids were wearing matching designer outfits. They ran around screaming, tearing open presents while my mom clapped and filmed them like it was the Macy's parade. I got one gift. A pair of socks. Practical, my mom chirped. You said you were working now, my dad added. You'll need those. I looked over at the tree, overflowing with boxes labeled Brooke, Brooke's kids, to the best mommy ever. And then I looked back at my socks. I felt something in me snap. But I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. I just excused myself, walked to the kitchen, and called Grandpa. He answered on the second ring. You ready? He asked. Yeah, I said. Let's do it. The week after Christmas, I stayed quiet. I went to work. I nodded when my parents told me to clean the garage. I even agreed to babysit Brooke's twins one afternoon while she took a mental health break. But underneath that, I was planning. I was meeting with Grandpa's attorney. I was gathering screenshots, documents, and bank printouts. And more than anything, I was preparing for war. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to make emotional appeals that would fall on deaf ears. I was going to outsmart them. And soon, they'd realize exactly what I'd become. Not the quiet, grateful son they could guilt into silence. Not the spare part of the family, but something else entirely. And the first blow would land on New Year's Eve. There was something poetic about hitting rock bottom on New Year's Eve. You'd think starting a new year would feel like a clean slate. But for me, it felt like the final nail in a coffin I hadn't even realized I was lying in. I was 19, living in my childhood bedroom surrounded by old posters of bands I didn't listen to anymore, working part-time at a hardware store while pretending not to hear my parents whisper about how I was wasting my potential. Brooke's kids had just gotten a brand new trampoline in the backyard. I got an expired Starbucks gift card. The worst part? I started to believe them. I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I was too soft. Maybe I didn't fight hard enough for college. Maybe Brooke did deserve the money more. She had kids. She had responsibilities. I was just one guy with a backpack full of notebooks and a heart full of stupid dreams. The doubts hit hardest at night. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, trying not to cry, trying to breathe through the weight sitting on my chest like a stone. My friends had gone off to college towns, dorm parties, study groups, futures. And me? I was spending 8 hours restocking light bulbs and pretending not to hear my coworkers call me the quiet kid with the messed up family. But somewhere in that silence, somewhere in that emptiness, something inside me started to change. I think pain does that. When the people you love rip away your foundation, you either crumble or you build something new. So I started building. Quietly. On the nights I didn't have a shift, I'd go to Grandpa's house. We'd sit in the garage, surrounded by the hum of old tools and the smell of motor oil, and he'd teach me things, real things. Not the kind of stuff you learn in a lecture hall, but the kind that makes you useful. Wiring, plumbing, engines, drafting. He even taught me how to solder, how to read blueprints, how to spot design flaws in household tools. And every single time I got something wrong, he never yelled. He'd just nod and say, "Try again." It was the first time in months I felt like I wasn't broken. One night, after we spent 3 hours fixing the starter on a rusted-out Chevy, he looked at me and said, "You're smart, Trev. Not just book smart. Builder smart. Don't waste that." It stuck. During the day, I worked. At night, I learned. And somewhere in between, I started saving. It wasn't much at first. A few bucks here, $10 there. I stopped eating takeout. Canceled subscriptions. Sold off some old video games and tech gear. Every dollar I didn't spend, I stored in a locked metal box Grandpa gave me. He called it seed money. Doesn't matter if it's small, he said. What matters is you grow it. Around mid-January, I stumbled onto a subreddit for home appliance repairs. People were posting videos of broken toasters, malfunctioning air fryers, busted vacuums. Some were asking for help. Others were posting tutorials. An idea clicked. I borrowed Grandpa's old camcorder, still ran on tape, and started filming myself repairing junk appliances I found on the curb. No fancy intro, no face cam, just my hands, my tools, and my voice explaining what I was doing. I uploaded the first video under the name Fix It Trev. It got 8 views. I didn't care. I made another, then another. By the end of February, I had uploaded 10 videos. Most had under 50 views. But then I posted one about fixing a dishwasher that made a loud grinding noise, and out of nowhere, it hit 3,000 views. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of excitement, but because it was the first time in months I felt like I mattered. I started learning basic editing, added subtitles, improved my lighting. I even bought a second-hand mic with the savings from my first YouTube payout, $78.33. It wasn't much, but it felt like a start. Meanwhile, the house felt different. My parents barely talked to me anymore, and when they did, it was usually to ask why I was always holed up in Grandpa's garage. My mom accused me of being obsessed with him. My dad said I should grow up and move on. Brooke, of course, stayed chirpy and clueless. Every time she dropped by, she'd flash me that same sugary smile and say things like, "You still mad about the whole college thing?" Like it was a spilled drink. Like I should have gotten over it by now. I said nothing, but I remembered everything. And I kept planning. Grandpa was working behind the scenes, too. I didn't know all the details yet, but every week he'd drop cryptic hints. Timing's everything. Don't let them see you coming. Let them think you're weak. Makes the punch land harder. We were working on something. I just didn't know the full picture yet. But I trusted him, and I kept building. By April, my channel had 2,000 subscribers. I had partnered with a small affiliate company that sold repair kits, and suddenly I was making $300 a month. Nothing huge, but compared to where I'd started, it was gold. I took that money and reinvested it. Better tools, better camera, a real laptop. I also started freelance work online, writing repair manuals, creating diagrams, even editing videos for other small creators. Every dollar I made, I split. Half into savings, half into a new project Grandpa and I had been sketching out on graph paper. I called it the Fix Box. It was basically a subscription kit for basic home repairs, simple tools, instructions, a link to a video tutorial I'd film each month. We built 3 prototypes by hand. Grandpa said it was the best idea he'd heard in 20 years. And for the first time, I started to believe him. Then came the breaking point. It wasn't some huge blow-up. It was something small. Isn't it always? One Sunday in May, I came home from work to find my metal cash box missing. I tore my room apart. Checked every drawer, closet, under the bed, behind the dresser. Nothing. I ran downstairs and found my mom folding laundry. "Have you seen my metal box?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She didn't even blink. "Oh, that junky old thing? I gave it to your dad. Thought it was part of Grandpa's scrap. There was money in there." She frowned. "What kind of money?" "My money." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Trevor. You're living here rent-free, eating our food. Don't act like you're paying for utilities. I earned that. Every dollar." "Enough," she snapped. "Your sister's husband got laid off. We needed some help around here. Be a part of the family for once." That was it. That was the exact moment something in me shattered into place. Not broke, solidified. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't even going to try to make her understand. I was done explaining myself. I just nodded, turned around, walked out the front door, and went straight to Grandpa's. When I told him what happened, he didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, handed me a cold soda, and said, "You ready to go nuclear?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. The next day, I quit the hardware store. 2 days later, I posted a video that went semi-viral, how I turned $300 in tools into a full-time job. By June, I'd hit 10,000 subscribers. The Fix Box was ready for soft launch. And Grandpa? He finally told me his full plan. It was bold. It was risky, but it was ours. And if it worked, it would be the beginning of the end for everyone who had written me off. Because they thought they'd buried me. But I wasn't buried. I was planted. And I was just starting to rise. It was a warm evening in early June when everything started falling into place. I was in Grandpa's garage, sitting on an overturned milk crate, staring at a whiteboard we'd filled with notes, sketches, deadlines, and a 3-word title circled in thick red marker, the setup phase. That's what Grandpa called it. Like we were planning a heist. In a way we were. Not the kind with ski masks or vaults, but the kind that requires precision, patience, and timing. The kind where you don't break in. You let them leave the door wide open and invite you inside. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy. It was going to be elegant. I spent the rest of June operating like a ghost in my own house, smiling when spoken to, helping out when asked, pretending like the missing cash box didn't matter, like I wasn't uploading repair tutorials that were now getting over 100,000 views, like I hadn't filed a quiet report with the State Department about a forged disbursement document tied to my name, like Grandpa hadn't just met with a lawyer to restructure a trust fund in my favor, all while playing the role of the overlooked, underachieving son with a hobby channel and too much free time. My parents were so busy focusing on Brooke's drama, her husband's unemployment, her emotional exhaustion, her new Pilates addiction. They didn't notice that I had started coming home later and later, my clothes smelling like sawdust and solder. Didn't ask why I had a P.O. box. Didn't wonder why I was suddenly carrying around a brand new laptop. Didn't question why I'd stopped asking them for anything at all, which was perfect, because the less they looked at me, the more I could move freely. In the second week of July, I launched the Fix Box. Soft, quiet, no ads, just a post on my channel and a mention on Reddit. I had 50 units. I sold out in 36 hours. Each box contained a simple toolkit, a how-to manual, and a QR code linking to an unlisted video. Month 1, how to fix a running toilet. It was basic, but people loved it. By the end of the month, I had 200 new subscribers, 500 email signups, and over 300 people on the wait list for the next round. I reinvested every cent into building the next batch. Grandpa and I practically lived in the garage. We printed, packed, and labeled everything ourselves. He let me use his credit card to buy supplies, and when I asked if he was sure, he just grinned and said, "Trev, this is the most fun I've had since I built your mom's treehouse. Only this time, I'm not putting a roof over someone who doesn't deserve it." Around that same time, I started reaching out to people from my past. One was Marcus, a kid I went to high school with. He was one of those overachievers who had been the president of for clubs and ran a tech newsletter. We hadn't talked much before graduation, but I remembered him saying he wanted to launch a startup for creator tools. We met for coffee at a local cafe. I told him what I was building. He stared at my sketches and said, "Dude, this could be huge." Within a week, we were brainstorming how to turn the Fix Box into an actual platform. Not just physical boxes, but full digital repair courses, tiered memberships, even an app with AR overlays for troubleshooting appliances. I didn't even realize how excited I was until I saw myself talking in the cafe window's reflection, hands flying, voice animated, face lit up in a way it hadn't been since before college fell apart. Marcus introduced me to his cousin Danny, a marketing major who offered to help with branding and outreach. I brought on another kid from Reddit, known only as Circuit Cracker, to help build the app backend. And suddenly, I had a team. We called ourselves Trev Tech, and we had plans. Meanwhile, Grandpa had his own part to play. He started attending more family events, barbecues, church cookouts, a 4th of July picnic where he wore a shirt that said, "Ask me about my favorite grandkid," with an arrow pointing to me. At first, my parents thought it was a joke. Brooke laughed awkwardly. My mom rolled her eyes. My dad muttered something about playing favorites. But when Grandpa kept doing it, bringing me up in every conversation, pulling me into photos, talking about Trevor's little project, they started getting nervous. Especially when he announced, very casually, that he was rewriting his will. "You don't need to worry about that," my mom said, laughing. "We're not after your money, Dad." He just smiled. Didn't say you were. But the look he gave her, she felt it. Around the same time, I got a call from the Office of Student Aid. They'd received my inquiry about the unauthorized use of funds tied to my education. Apparently, the letter my mother submitted to access the money had included a poorly forged signature, my own, one I could easily prove wasn't mine. They were investigating. Quietly, but thoroughly. I didn't say anything to my parents. Just watched as my mom grew more tense by the day. Watched as she started double-checking the mail. Watched as she hovered near the phone more often. Then one day in early August, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I feel like you're hiding something." I looked up from my bowl of cereal. "Like what?" "I don't know. You're always out. You and your grandfather whisper. And you've been smug." "Smug? Yes. Like you're waiting for something to happen." I shrugged. "I guess I've just been focused." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you talking to lawyers?" Nope, I said truthfully. Not just lawyers. She didn't like that. And I didn't care. Because her worry wasn't about me. It wasn't about what I might be going through. It was about control. And she was losing it. Fast. Mid-August, I hit 50,000 subscribers. The Fixbox had 600 active monthly users. TrevTech's prototype app was in beta. And then, like clockwork, it happened. Brooke asked for more money. Specifically, she asked if Grandpa could help with rent this month. Apparently, her husband's new job had not panned out, and she was behind on bills. At a family dinner, she brought it up in front of everyone. "Dad," she said sweetly, "you've been helping Trevor so much. I was hoping maybe." "No," Grandpa said before she could finish. Everyone froze. "I'm sorry," she said, blinking. I said no. "But you took $62,000 from Trevor's future and didn't even say thank you. You don't get to ask for more." My mom jumped in. "Dad, that was years ago. 10 months. It was for the good of the family." "No," he said. "It was for the convenience of yours." I watched them squirm, holding back a smile. And then Grandpa turned to me. "Trevor, would you like to tell them your news?" I stood up, cleared my throat, and said, "Actually, yeah. I've been accepted into a special business accelerator program. It's competitive. Only a dozen creators selected nationwide. They're funding our product development and providing legal support. I'm moving out next week." My mom looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Brooke blinked rapidly. My dad leaned back, silent, and I just smiled. "I start pitching to investors in September," I added. "It's a 6-month program. If we meet our targets, we get follow-on funding. Equity-based." I could have added more. I could have rubbed it in. But I didn't need to. Because the silence in that room, that was better than any monologue. Later that night, Grandpa handed me a small envelope. Inside was a key. "To your new place," he said. I thought the accelerator was providing housing. "They are," he said. "But I bought you something extra." "What?" "A fixer-upper duplex. Good bones. Cheap. In your name. Call it an investment." I stared at him. "Why are you doing all this for me?" He smiled. "Because they forgot who you were." But I never did. The next few days were a blur. Packing. Paperwork. Finalizing app updates. Announcing my departure. And then, I was gone. Moved into a modest apartment in a new city, surrounded by ambition, mentorship, and momentum. My channel hit 100,000 subscribers. My business hit its first $10,000 month. And back home, the walls were starting to close in. The investigation was coming to a head. And I still had one last move left to play. By the time fall rolled in, everything was in motion. Leaves were changing, air turning sharper. My channel crossed 150,000 subscribers. The Fixbox had become a full-fledged business with monthly recurring revenue, glowing reviews, and an official LLC. Our app, TrevTools, was being downloaded in over 30 countries. My face still wasn't on camera, just my hands and voice, but people knew me now. Not as Trevor the spare son, or Brooke's weird brother, but as the guy who could teach you how to fix your life with a wrench, a plan, and some grit. And while all that grew, the real setup back home was finally reaching its climax. I got the call in late September. The Office of Student Aid. "Mr. Owens," the woman on the line said, "our investigation into the disputed college fund withdrawal is complete. Thank you for your patience." I didn't speak. I just listened. "We've confirmed that your signature was forged and that the disbursement was requested under false pretenses. The matter is now being referred to the local district attorney for potential criminal charges. We've also contacted the financial institution that processed the withdrawal. They're cooperating fully." I didn't smile. Not yet. Then came the kicker. "As the original beneficiary of the 529 account, you are entitled to restitution. We're coordinating with the trust's overseer, Mr. Walter Owens." "My grandfather," I said. "Yes, he's been incredibly helpful." That's when I allowed myself a single nod. Checkmate was near. I didn't tell my parents right away. Why would I? They hadn't even bothered to check in on me since I moved. Not one text. Not one call. Not even a half-hearted, "hope you're doing well" comment on any of my videos. But Brooke? She finally reached out. I got a DM on Instagram in October. It was a selfie of her crying. "I'm sorry things got weird. I miss you. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Then 2 days later, my mom called. That was rare. She never initiated contact unless she needed something. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that started like this. "Trevor, We heard something strange from a friend at the bank. Something about an investigation. Please, call me back. We need to clear this up. There's no reason to make this a legal matter. I didn't call back. Because there was every reason to make this a legal matter. They took what wasn't theirs. Lied about it. Forged documents. Used me as an excuse to fund someone else's life. And then had the audacity to act like I was the selfish one for wanting it back. So no, I didn't call back. I forwarded the voicemail to Grandpa. He laughed so hard he had to sit down. A week later, they were served. I wasn't there to see it, but I got the play-by-play from Grandpa. My mom had apparently opened the door in her robe, expecting a package. Instead, she got 2 manila envelopes. One from the district attorney's office regarding pending charges of financial misrepresentation and fraud. The other a civil suit filed by me for damages, breach of fiduciary duty, and restitution of funds taken from my education account. The best part? The letterhead had my full name at the top. Trevor Owens, founder, TrevTech LLC. I wasn't the passive son anymore. I was the plaintiff. They called, texted, emailed, begged. I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I issued all communication through my lawyer. Her name was Camila, sharp, fearless, and efficient. She'd graduated top of her class, and she hated financial abuse. Let them squirm, she told me. And squirm they did. They tried to downplay it. Tried to act like it had been a misunderstanding. But when the forged signature was presented alongside my real one, there was nothing left to argue. And the financial institution? They didn't want bad press. They offered to settle fast. My parents were cut out of the loop entirely. It was poetic. The very account they looted ended up repaying me without their consent. But I wasn't done. The restitution money came through, plus penalties. Over $70,000 in total. I didn't need it anymore. So I used it publicly. I donated half to a nonprofit that funded vocational education for low-income teens. The other half, I used to fund the first full-scale production of the Fix box across 5 states. I made a video about it. Didn't mention my family. Didn't name names. But I ended the video with a line that hit harder than any accusation. Sometimes the people who should believe in you the most don't. And that's okay. Because if you stay quiet long enough to build, one day they'll have no choice but to watch. That video hit 1.2 million views in a week. My inbox exploded. A brand deal offer from a tool company. A request to be on a business podcast. Even a school district asking if I'd build a curriculum. It was surreal. I had gone from ignored and invisible to unstoppable. Thanksgiving rolled around again. Grandpa invited me to his place for a small dinner. Just us, a few of his friends, and Marcus and Danny from TrevTech. The vibe was light, warm, joyful. And just as we were finishing dessert, Grandpa pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver ring. Old, but polished. It was my father's, he said. He gave it to me when I built my first shop. Said, it's not about money. It's about making something. And you, Trevor, you've made something bigger than any of us imagined. I slipped it on. It fit perfectly. The fallout back home wasn't pretty. The criminal charges didn't stick. First-time offense, no prior record, blah, blah, blah. But the public record? That stayed. Brooke lost her part-time job at the local daycare when the scandal made small-town news. My dad had to step down from the board of a local credit union. My mom stopped showing up to her book club. And Grandpa? He rewrote his will, made it public, and left a copy on their doorstep. Everything, his house, his land, his savings, was going to me. He didn't do it to punish them. He did it to protect me. But I can't lie. That part felt good. I haven't spoken to them since. They still try, every few months. A birthday message. A forwarded article. A half-hearted, "We're proud of you" comment under a burner account on one of my videos. But I don't engage. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because I've learned something important. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's just living your life so fully and freely that the people who tried to break you have to watch you shine from a distance they can never cross. Now, every time I fix something, whether it's a busted motor or a broken belief, I remember who I was, who they tried to convince me I'd always be. And I smile. Because they were wrong. And I was never going nowhere. I was going everywhere. Turns out, I didn't need their map, because I built my own road. I'm James, 32, and for most of my adult life, I've been the dependable sibling. You know, the one, always there to help move furniture, always picking up the check when mom accidentally forgets her wallet, always called when the printer breaks or when someone needs to borrow a car. I never really minded. I had a good job in project management, lived modestly, and figured if I could help my family, why wouldn't I? That logic didn't prepare me for my sister, Caroline's, wedding. Caroline is 29, the golden child of the family. She has this way of making herself the center of any room, loud laugh, perfect makeup, endless stream of compliments for strangers that somehow sound like subtle digs. Growing up, I always felt like the supporting cast in her spotlight. But again, I never really minded. We were different. I was quiet, practical. She was loud, spontaneous. It worked, until it didn't. The wedding planning started 6 months ago, and from the beginning, it was chaos. Caroline had champagne tastes and a boxed wine budget. The kind of person who says, "Oh, I saw this on Pinterest," and then tries to recreate a $40,000 floral arch with grocery store flowers and masking tape. I stayed out of it at first. But when Mom called me one night, panic in her voice, saying they needed someone just to help with the deposits, I caved. The first $2,000 was for the venue, then $1,200 for catering, then $900 for custom invitations. Before I knew it, I had transferred over $13,000 in payments, all from my account, all under my name, because Caroline's new business was still in the growth phase, and our parents' retirement fund had mysteriously evaporated into backyard renovations and emergency cruises. Caroline always promised she'd pay me back as soon as the Etsy shop takes off, which is rich, considering she's sold exactly 3 tie-dyed yoga mats since she launched it in January. Still, I didn't complain. I figured, it's family. That was until the wedding invitations went out. I found out I wasn't invited when my coworker Rachel mentioned receiving one. Rachel, a woman Caroline had met exactly once, for 15 minutes, when I brought her as my +1 to a family brunch. I laughed at first, thinking it was a mix-up. Maybe my invitation got lost in the mail? Maybe they were planning something special? So I called Mom. Her voice was tight when she picked up. "James, honey, we just figured you'd be too busy to come. You're always working, right?" I was stunned. Not angry, yet just genuinely confused. Too busy to come to my own sister's wedding? I paid for half of it. There was a pause. Then she said something that would replay in my head for weeks. "It's Caroline's day. We didn't want any tension." I didn't even know how to respond to that. I wasn't the one causing tension. I hadn't even raised my voice about the money, the disorganization, or the dozen times Caroline pushed meetings onto my calendar to help her brainstorm reception themes. I hung up, silent. Then, 2 days later, it got worse. I opened the family group chat, one that I had mostly muted because it was filled with 94% Caroline selfies and 6% passive-aggressive reminders from Mom, and saw a new message from Caroline. A photo of her holding her wedding dress, captioned, "Can't believe it's almost here." Underneath, a text followed, "Let's be real, it's better without his vibe anyway." I stared at it for a long time. No one responded to it. Not Mom, not Dad, not my cousin Nate, who I knew owed me $300. No one said a word. I don't even think they realized I'd seen it. That was the moment the numbness cracked. I wasn't hurt. I was done. I didn't reply. I didn't call. Instead, I pulled out a folder I kept in my desk drawer, copies of every payment I'd made, every invoice in my name, every contract that still had my signature as the guarantor. I didn't even realize how deep in I was until I saw it all laid out. A $13,500 wedding I'd helped bankroll, a photographer contract I'd co-signed, a catering deposit that was under my business account because they couldn't get approved. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat down with my laptop. I didn't touch the group chat. I didn't say a word to Caroline. I just opened my banking app and froze the pending transfer for the remaining $3,000 catering balance. Then I called the vendors, one by one, with a calm, detached tone I didn't know I had in me. "Hi. Yes, this is James. I'm the primary on the agreement. I'd like to cancel the reservation due to a breach of agreement." The florist hesitated but agreed. The band seemed relieved. The tent rental guy was sympathetic, said something about family always expecting too much. I didn't need validation, but hearing that made something in my chest unclench. It was the sign that pushed me into my final act. The night before the wedding, I drove by the venue. I'd been there for the planning meetings, another thing they conveniently forgot to thank me for. The welcome sign was already up, Caroline and Mason, forever begins today. It was surrounded by fairy lights and flowers. I parked across the street, walked over with my hood up, and carefully peeled the corner of the wooden welcome sign up just enough to press one small sticky note onto the back. Just one sentence. Fund it yourself. Then I walked away. By the time I got back home, my phone had begun lighting up. First, it was Mom's 6 missed calls. Then Caroline. What did you do? Then a text from the venue manager, confused why the tent hadn't arrived. I didn't answer any of them. I just closed my laptop, turned off my ringer, and finally, got a full night's sleep. But that was only the beginning. The next morning, I made pancakes. That probably sounds strange, but there was something therapeutic about it. I hadn't cooked a real breakfast for myself in weeks. Too many late nights spent fixing Caroline's vendor spreadsheets. Too many early mornings getting dragged into emergency planning calls. That morning, I let the butter brown a little too long, sipped my coffee slowly, and watched the sun come up without a single obligation breathing down my neck. By 10:17 a.m., my phone had 42 missed calls. Caroline was the first to crack. She called me 3 times, then left a voicemail that I'll never delete. Her voice started syrupy sweet, like she was trying to pretend everything was normal, but halfway through, she snapped. James, hey, there's some kind of issue with the catering? And the sound system guy said the deposit bounced? I don't know what's going on, but this is my wedding day. Can you just fix it? A pause. Then the voice changed. I know you're mad, but this is really selfish. You're ruining it for everyone just because you didn't get invited. Grow up. It's not always about you. She hung up without waiting for a reply. I didn't bother calling back. Instead, I watched the clock tick. Noon. That was around the time the first guests would be arriving at the venue. By 12:30, I got a text from Rachel, the coworker I'd mentioned, the one who somehow got an invite when I didn't. Hey, are you here? Everyone's kind of standing around. There's no music? No food. I think something's wrong. I replied with just 3 words. Not my problem. At 1:03 p.m., the dam broke. Mom texted first. Her message was less words, more emotional damage. What did you do? Do you have any idea what this day means to your sister? Yes, I did. I knew exactly what it meant to her. A performance. A spotlight. A day to feed her ego while she trampled over everyone who'd helped her get there. The wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a marketing opportunity for her influencer fantasy. And I'd bankrolled the dress rehearsal for long enough. The next few texts were a frantic montage of digital shouting. The florist says they're not coming. Did you cancel the DJ too? Mason's family is furious. Everyone's asking questions. Where are you? I turned off my phone. I already knew how this would play out. Caroline would cry, maybe even fake faint. Mom would blame me, not once acknowledging the fact that they deliberately excluded me. Dad, if he even showed up, he tends to disappear when things get heated, would make some vague, let's not assign blame right now, type of speech while sipping his 4th gin and tonic. And Mason? I didn't care about Mason. He once told me NFTs were the future of healthcare. He'd be fine. But I had one last move. You see, in the chaos of planning, and Caroline being, well, Caroline, she hadn't realized something important. The venue itself was under my name, not hers, not our parents', mine. Because when the deposit needed to be submitted and her credit card declined, the venue manager had asked for someone more stable. I'd been dumb enough to say yes at the time. Now, I saw it as insurance. At 1:47 p.m., I called the venue manager. Hi, Angela. It's James. A long pause. Oh, I was wondering when you'd call. I just wanted to confirm that the contract's canceled. There's no event today. Another pause. I could hear the murmur of voices behind her, like she'd stepped away from a crowd. I thought the event planner said everything was still happening. I kept my voice even. There is no planner. There is no event. It's in writing. You'll be receiving a revised termination form by this evening. Until then, please ask all staff to pause operations. She hesitated. James, they're already here. There's like 100 guests walking around. Then I suggest you ask Caroline how she plans to pay for all of it. Because the card on file isn't mine anymore. I hung up. After that, I packed a weekend bag, grabbed my keys, and drove 2 hours up the coast to a quiet little Airbnb I'd rented the night before. It had an ocean view, blackout curtains, and a stocked kitchen. No wedding drama. No entitled texts. Just me. At some point that afternoon, while I was sipping a beer on the balcony, I checked my email out of pure curiosity. There were already 3 messages forwarded from the venue manager, all with the same subject line: urgent, outstanding balance. By sunset, someone, probably Mason's dad, had tried calling from a blocked number. Then, finally, at 7:08 p.m., I got a message from my cousin Nate. "Dude, what happened? She's losing her mind. People brought gifts, and there's no dinner. No music. She just screamed at the wedding cake guy, and he walked out." Then, a follow-up: "I think someone just threw up in the bushes." I smiled. Not out of cruelty. Not because I wanted the day to fall apart for no reason. But because for the first time in years, I wasn't the background character cleaning up everyone else's mess. I wasn't the wallet. I wasn't the pushover. I was the guy who finally said, "Enough." And just when I thought the chaos had peaked, someone knocked on my Airbnb door. It was almost 8 p.m. by then. The sky had gone that deep navy blue you only get near the coast, and the waves outside my window crashed with rhythmic calm. I just finished heating up some leftover pasta and was halfway through pouring myself a second glass of wine when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 times. Not loud. Not angry. But insistent. Like someone who wanted to seem composed, but couldn't quite hide the edge of desperation. I froze. There was no way. No one, not even my closest friends, knew I was here. I hadn't posted, hadn't told anyone. I booked the Airbnb under a nickname I sometimes use for privacy. But that knock was real. And the silence after it? Louder than any scream. For a moment, I considered not answering. Let whoever it was stand out there and stew in the consequences of whatever brought them this far. But curiosity got the better of me. I walked slowly to the door and peered through the peephole. Caroline. Her makeup was still on, but smudged, the kind of smudge you get from crying in public and trying to fix it in the reflection of a locked car window. Her once perfectly styled hair was pinned haphazardly behind her ears, and her white reception dress, because of course she had a second outfit planned, was wrinkled, the hem streaked with what looked like mud or maybe spilled champagne. She looked like a ghost of the woman who'd spammed our family group chat with vision board screenshots for 6 months. I opened the door, but only halfway. She blinked at me like she didn't believe I was real. "You're really here?" I didn't move. "How'd you find me?" I asked Rachel. Of course. Rachel had been kind enough to ask if I was coming the day before. I told her I wasn't. Told her I needed some quiet. Apparently, she thought she was doing the right thing by giving Caroline my location. I didn't blame her. Not really. Caroline looked past me, into the Airbnb, then back at me. "Can I come in?" No, she blinked again, taken aback. Caroline wasn't used to being denied. She was used to manipulating her way into what she wanted, always with a laugh, a fake apology, or a crocodile tear. But I just stood there, unmoved. She crossed her arms and shifted her weight to one foot. "Look, I know you're mad. You think. But this is my wedding, James. Do you have any idea what you did?" People flew in. The whole thing was falling apart, and I didn't know what was happening. The florist just didn't show up. The DJ said he got a cancellation call but wouldn't refund us. And the caterer said the contract was canceled and, God, it was like sabotage. I leaned against the doorframe. Calm. Quiet. "You mean it felt like someone pulled the plug on everything you didn't pay for?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic." I almost laughed. "Don't be dramatic," from the woman who'd once faked a fainting spell because someone wore a similar dress to hers at a graduation party. Instead, I said nothing. She huffed. "You could have just talked to me. Instead, you blindsided me. You ruined my wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? So I was supposed to fund it, organize half of it, get left off the guest list, then keep smiling through it. You were never supposed to find out," she blurted. That stunned me. Her eyes went wide, realizing what she said. But it was too late. "You knew I wasn't invited?" I asked, voice low now. "You knew, and you didn't stop it?" Caroline backpedaled instantly. "It was Mom's idea. She thought it'd just cause drama if you were there. You always make things tense." "Tense?" I cut in. "You mean I make things tense by not letting you walk all over me? Or by not faking a smile when I'm insulted in the family group chat?" That landed. Her shoulders sagged a little. She looked out toward the ocean. I wanted the day to be perfect." "You mean curated?" Silence stretched between us, the air thick with everything she wouldn't say. She'd always wanted her life to look like something out of a magazine. Every moment staged, every photo ready to post. The problem was she saw people, family, as props in that fantasy. "I spent 13.5 grand, Caroline," I finally said. "Money I didn't owe. Time I didn't have. Energy I'll never get back. And I didn't even ask for credit. Just a seat. One seat. Caroline swallowed hard, and for a second, I saw something unfamiliar flicker across her face. Regret. Maybe. Her shame. But it was gone just as quickly. I'll pay you back, she said weakly. I gave her a look that must have said everything. We both knew she couldn't. Not now. Maybe not ever. And that wasn't even the point. I don't want your money, I said. I want distance. That hit her harder than anything else. Her mouth opened slightly, like she was about to protest, but no sound came out. I let the silence sit. Finally, she took a step back. So that's it? You're cutting me off. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just done holding you up. Then I shut the door. Softly. No drama. No slam. Just finality. I stood there for a long moment, hands still on the knob, listening to the quiet. No footsteps. No knock. Just the ocean, rolling outside like none of this had ever happened. She didn't knock again. I waited maybe 2 minutes after I closed the door, just standing there, heart beating fast, not from regret, but from release. You spend years keeping the peace, brushing off insults, swallowing disrespect, and you forget what it feels like to set a boundary and hold it. That door was more than a slab of wood. It was the first time in my life I told my sister no and meant it. I watched through the blinds as she stood in the driveway. Her arms were crossed now, her head down, pacing in a little circle like she was deciding whether to come back and try again. She didn't. After a minute, she got in a silver SUV, Mason's dad's car. I recognized it, and drove off. No screeching tires. No dramatic exit. Just a slow, defeated departure down the coast road. I went back inside, poured myself the wine I'd abandoned, and collapsed on the couch. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. But freedom, as I learned quickly, doesn't always come quietly. That night, I turned my phone back on. Not because I wanted to talk to anyone, but because I wanted to see the extent of the damage. What I found was a digital avalanche of blame, guilt, and spin. Mom had messaged 10 times in a row. Each one more pointed than the last. You humiliated your sister. This will scar her for life. You've embarrassed the family. If your father's blood pressure spikes again, that's on you. Do you even care about anyone but yourself? I rolled my eyes. Then I checked Facebook. Caroline had posted a carefully filtered black and white photo of her and Mason, cropped to hide the empty reception tent and the fact that half the guests had left early. The caption read, "Sometimes, plans fall apart, but love always wins. Thank you to the friends and family who supported us today. To those who didn't, we see you too." The comments were exactly what you'd expect. "So sorry, babe. You looked stunning. Can't believe someone would sabotage such a beautiful day. Some people are just bitter. Let the haters hate. You still got the ring, queen." It was clear she was trying to control the narrative. I was the villain now. The bitter, jealous older brother who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Who bailed last minute and left everyone stranded. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I spent the next week quietly gathering receipts. Email threads. Bank statements. Screenshots of every deposit. Vendor contracts with my name and signature. The canceled transfer confirmations. Even the text from Caroline saying it was better without my vibe. I compiled everything into a PDF, title, The Real Story, and let it sit on my desktop. I wasn't planning to post it. I didn't need to win the internet. But I wasn't about to let my name get dragged through the mud either. Then I got a call from my dad. We hadn't spoken much in years. He was the kind of man who believed silence was wisdom and apathy was strength. But that day, he called, and I answered. His voice was tired. Not angry. Just tired. "Son, can we talk?" I didn't say no. We met at a local diner, neutral territory. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. Like the years of playing referee between my mother and Caroline had drained the life out of him. We sat at a corner booth. He didn't even open the menu. "I won't pretend to understand what happened," he said. "But your mother is upset. Caroline's a mess. This thing, it's tearing the family apart." I sipped my coffee. It was already torn. I just stopped patching it up. He sighed. "Your sister said you ruined the wedding." I handed him a flash drive across the table. "Here, that's every invoice I paid. Every contract I signed. Every service I canceled after I saw I wasn't invited." He didn't reach for it. Just stared at it like it was a live grenade. I added, "And you know what the worst part is? I didn't even want recognition. I just wanted to be treated like family. Like a person, not a tool." He finally looked up. And for once, there was no defense in his eyes. Just weariness. You're not wrong. But it's going to take time to fix. I nodded. That's assuming I even want to. He didn't argue. Just took the flash drive, nodded once, and left. 2 days later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then I got a voicemail. It was Mason. Hey, man. I know we don't know each other well, but I just wanted to say. I didn't know she'd cut you from the invite list. I thought you just didn't show. I would have said something if I'd known. Honestly. I'm sorry. We're still dealing with the mess. Some vendors are threatening legal action. Her dad's furious. I don't know, man. Yeah, sorry. I didn't call him back, but I appreciated it. Slightly. Later that night, I got a message from Rachel. So, I heard the real story. That was legendary. Everyone's whispering about it at work. Someone even called it Wedding-Aid. I laughed. First time I had in days. The whispers continued. Apparently, one of the caterers posted a vague tweet about clients canceling last minute after treating their own family like garbage. It went mildly viral. A few people pieced things together. Caroline tried to delete her Facebook post. By the following week, she'd gone quiet online. Then Mom called. I didn't answer. Then she emailed. A long, rambling wall of text about family being complicated and everyone making mistakes, and how could you let your sister suffer like that? That's when I decided to respond. Not with anger, not with spite, just clarity. I wrote. For years, I gave without asking for anything. I paid bills, solved problems, and showed up when no one else did. And in return, I was excluded from the one event I helped make possible. That's not family. That's exploitation. You want to mend things? Start by taking responsibility. Until then, I'm out. I hit send, blocked her number, blocked Caroline's, changed the password to the family Netflix account just for the symbolism of it. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've moved to a new city, smaller place, quieter. Started freelancing instead of grinding out 60-hour work weeks. Took a vacation. Alone. For the first time in my life, I'm building things for me. Caroline still owes money to 3 vendors. The wedding photographer kept the photos until they finished payment, which they didn't. So Caroline's only wedding picture is that smudged Instagram post with the guilt trip caption. Word got around the extended family. A few of them reached out to say they had no idea. I believed some of them. Others, not so much. As for my parents, they haven't visited, haven't apologized. That's fine. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Sometimes, people don't realize the value of what you give until you stop giving it. And sometimes, walking away isn't the dramatic act of vengeance they imagine. It's just a quiet return to peace. And trust me, peace is the best revenge there is. The day I turned 18, I didn't get a cake. I didn't get balloons, a party, or even a single happy birthday from my mom. What I got instead was a duffel bag tossed at my feet and a cold stare that froze me harder than the December wind behind our broken front door. You're an adult now, Jason, she said, her arms crossed and lips tight. Time for you to figure life out on your own. Then she walked back to the kitchen like she hadn't just thrown her only son out of the house without warning and without $1 to his name. I stood there, in my beat-up sneakers and thrift store jacket, clutching a bag I didn't even remember packing. Later I'd realized she must have done it for me the night before, while I was still asleep in my bed, dreaming naive dreams of adulthood meaning freedom, not abandonment. I waited at the door for her to change her mind, or at least offer a ride to the bus station. She didn't. The front door clicked shut behind me with a finality that hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. Just like that, I was homeless. Happy birthday to me. I guess I should back up a bit, give some context before you think I'm just another teenager whining about growing up. My name's Jason, and at the time all this happened, I was still in high school. 18, sure, but not even halfway through my senior year. I had good grades, a part-time job at a local grocery store, and I kept to myself. I wasn't out partying or getting into trouble. I was, in every sense, the kind of kid who deserved a shot, or at least a roof over his head until graduation. But in my mom's eyes, the day I legally became an adult was the day I stopped being her responsibility. Growing up, it was always just the two of us. My dad was never in the picture. I asked once when I was 7 and got silence and a slammed cabinet door in response. After that, I stopped asking. Mom worked a lot of odd jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing, sometimes disappearing for a week or two and coming back with more money and more bruises. When she was around, She was either exhausted or angry, usually both. Still, I tried not to give her any more reasons to yell. I kept the apartment clean, cooked simple meals, made excuses for her when she forgot to show up to parent-teacher conferences. I learned early that love, at least in our house, was conditional. She didn't say, "I love you," not even in the background noise of routine. There were no hugs, no warmth. Just rules, expectations, and plenty of guilt. If I asked for new shoes, I was ungrateful. If I got an A, it wasn't an A+. If I was quiet, I was moody. If I spoke up, I was disrespectful. The goalposts kept moving, and no matter how much I bent myself to try and meet them, it was never enough. Still, I thought that maybe, just maybe, turning 18 would be different. That she'd see I was trying. That she'd be proud, even if she didn't say it out loud. I didn't expect a party. We'd never had money for that. But maybe a dinner, or even just a quiet evening together. I was dumb enough to believe she'd care. Turns out, she'd been waiting for the day she could finally wash her hands of me. The night before my birthday, I'd come home from my shift at the store to find her in one of her moods. She was chain-smoking by the window, pacing like a caged animal. I didn't say much. I knew better, but I offered to heat up some leftover pasta. She waved me off without a word. Later, I heard her on the phone in her room, whispering furiously. I couldn't catch much, but one sentence stood out. "He's 18 tomorrow. I don't owe him a damn thing after that." I lay awake most of the night, trying to tell myself she didn't mean it, that I'd misunderstood. But deep down, I knew. I think I'd known for a long time that she was just waiting for the excuse. She wanted her life back, whatever that meant to her, and I was just in the way. Her burden, her excuse, her guilt. The morning came with silence. No breakfast, no greeting. Just that bag by the door and those words. "You're an adult now. Figure life out on your own." I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded and stepped out, feeling like I was leaving behind something that had been broken long before I realized it. I walked 2 miles to a park where I used to go as a kid, sat on a frozen bench, and opened the bag. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, 1 hoodie, a toothbrush, and the $20 I'd hidden in an envelope under my mattress. She'd taken that too. I guess she figured I didn't need it. That was the beginning. The first cut. I spent that night in the back of a laundromat, wrapped in my hoodie and listening to the buzz of machines. The next week blurred together, sleeping on benches, eating whatever I could afford, showering at the gym when I could sneak in. I didn't tell anyone from school. I was too proud, too ashamed. I kept showing up, tired and hungry, pretending everything was fine. Teachers started to notice, but no one said anything directly. I heard whispers. "He looks sick. Something's off with Jason." But no one asked. One day, my guidance counselor pulled me aside. Mrs. Whitaker. She was one of the few adults who ever looked me in the eye and meant it. She asked if everything was okay at home. I wanted to lie, but the truth just spilled out. She didn't cry or gasp. She just listened. Really listened. Then she got to work. She helped me apply for emergency housing, talked to the principal about meal vouchers, even called in a favor with a local nonprofit that helped kids in crisis. I didn't want charity, but I was out of options. That little bit of help kept me alive. Meanwhile, I never heard a word from my mom. No calls. No messages. Nothing. She vanished like I'd never existed. I was out of her life, and that was clearly the way she wanted it. But here's the thing. Every night I went to sleep in that cold shelter bed. I repeated the same promise to myself. One day, she'd regret every word she said to me. One day, I'd be so far above what she thought I could ever be, she'd have no choice but to see it. Not because I wanted her approval. I didn't. Not anymore. But because I wanted her to know she was wrong. About me. About everything. And when that day came, I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight. I'd just smile and walk away. I didn't know how I'd do it yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd make sure she regretted it. Every single word. And the first crack in that plan. It came a few weeks later, when I found out a secret about my mom she never thought I'd discover. For weeks after I got kicked out, I kept telling myself it was temporary. That she'd come around. That maybe she was just stressed, or scared, or overwhelmed. I clung to that fantasy like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Because if your own mom can throw you away like garbage and not feel anything, what does that say about you? But she didn't come around. In fact, the more I learned, the clearer it became that she'd been planning my exit for a long time. Mrs. Whitaker helped me enroll in the local youth shelter's support program. It wasn't glamorous, a bunk bed in a shared room, rotating chores, group meetings twice a week, but it was warm. It was safe. And it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I had something resembling stability. I worked extra hours at the grocery store, took night shifts when I could. I kept my head down and my grades up. My social life disappeared, but so had my ability to care. Every spare minute was focused on survival. I didn't even have time to process the grief. Not until one cold Thursday afternoon in late January. It started when I ran into Mrs. Grady, our old neighbor from the building. She was walking her tiny dog outside the community center where I volunteered to get extra service hours. She recognized me instantly, though I must have looked like I'd aged 10 years since she last saw me. "Oh my goodness, Jason," she gasped, tugging her coat tighter. "Are you all right, sweetie? Your mom said you went off to college early." I blinked. "College?" She nodded. "That's what she told everyone. Said you got a scholarship and left on your birthday." She was just telling Mrs. Flanders about how proud she was, how you were becoming a man and starting your life. I didn't even know how to respond. Proud. She hadn't even texted me. Hadn't shown up to the winter graduation planning meeting where parents were supposed to RSVP for cap and gown payments. I was standing in front of a neighbor who was being fed a fantasy while I was living in a shelter, eating instant noodles, and wondering if my uniform smelled too much like disinfectant. That was the first crack in the lie, and it only got worse from there. Turns out, my mom didn't just kick me out, she replaced me. Her younger sister, Aunt Kim, came up from Florida a week after my birthday. I didn't know this right away, but one of the younger kids from the building DM'd me on Instagram. "Your cousin's living at your place now?" What happened, LOL? I didn't even know I had a cousin. Curiosity and something darker, something like dread, made me dig. Turns out, Aunt Kim had a kid. Younger than me, maybe 16. His name was Tyler. I recognized the last name from when I used to sort mail at our apartment complex. Tyler had been living in and out of group homes. Trouble at school. Petty theft. All the things my mom accused me of when she was angry, but I never actually did. Now he was sleeping in my bed, wearing my old hoodie, going through the fridge that I used to stock with groceries I paid for. And my mom, she was posting smiling selfies with him. Captioned things like, "So proud of my nephew. New beginnings, red heart." Nephew, not son. Son didn't exist anymore, apparently. I felt like I was floating above my own life. Like someone had taken a hacksaw to the foundation of my identity and left me to balance on the splinters. The one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally had chosen to reinvent her life, and I was airbrushed out of it completely. But I wasn't angry yet. Not really. Not until I found the envelope. I was helping Mrs. Whitaker organize a charity drive at the school office. She had this big stack of mail that needed sorting, scholarship offers, community flyers, report cards. One envelope had my name on it. Thick. Official looking. I opened it without thinking. Inside was a letter from Millstone Technical College, offering me a full-ride scholarship for their business management program. Full tuition covered. Monthly stipend. Housing options available for low-income applicants. The letter was dated December 2nd. My birthday was December 17th, and it had been sent to my home address. I stared at that paper for a full minute before the full horror of it clicked. My mom got the letter. She knew. She knew I had a way out, and she never gave it to me. I folded the paper back into the envelope, my hands trembling. "Mrs. Whitaker?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something weird?" She looked up. "Of course. Do you know if it's legal for a parent to throw away a college offer?" Her eyes narrowed instantly. "Jason, what did you find?" I handed her the envelope. She read it twice, then sat down hard in her chair. "She knew," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "She knew I had this, and she still kicked me out." Mrs. Whitaker didn't say much, but I could tell from the way her jaw tightened that she was furious. She promised she'd help me reach out to the school directly, and she did, but it was too late. The acceptance deadline had passed. They'd already moved on to the wait list. The administrator sounded genuinely sympathetic. If we'd heard from him in December, this would have been a done deal, she said. But now, there's nothing we can do. I walked out of that meeting in a daze. Not because I'd lost the scholarship, but because I'd never even had a chance to accept it. My mom had stolen it from me. A way out. A future. And for what? That's when the anger finally came. Real, burning anger. The kind that sits deep in your chest and hums like a machine. I spent the next few days in a fog. I went to work. I went to class. But my mind kept replaying every moment I ever tried to impress her. Every time I cleaned the kitchen so she wouldn't yell. Every time I brought home an A, thinking maybe that would be the thing that made her see me. She didn't see me. She never did. She saw what she needed, a scapegoat, a workhorse. And when I stopped serving that purpose, she replaced me without blinking. What pushed me over the edge, what turned that anger into something more focused, more dangerous, was the birthday party. Not my birthday party. Tyler's. It was on February 20th, a Saturday. I only knew because someone tagged the apartment complex in a post, and I followed the breadcrumbs like a bloodhound. She threw him a full party. Balloons. A banner. A freaking cake that had, "Welcome to the family, Tyler," written in cursive icing. I saw it all. The videos. The group selfies. My mom, drunk and dancing, holding a red Solo cup like she was 21 again. Tyler, grinning like he owned the place. I don't remember making the decision to go there. I just remember standing outside the building, watching the party through the windows, my fists clenched in my coat pockets. I wasn't going to go in. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction. But then I saw her come outside to smoke, just like she used to, and something inside me snapped. I walked up slowly. She didn't see me until I was a few feet away. When she did, she froze. Then she smiled, the fake one she used to give teachers and landlords. "Well, look who finally grew a spine," she said. I said nothing. She gestured toward the apartment. "You're not invited." I figured. She took a drag of her cigarette. "You still mad I gave you the boot? Grow up, Jason. Life's tough. I did you a favor. You threw away my scholarship." That wiped the smirk off her face. "I found the letter," I said, voice tight. "You knew I got accepted. And you hid it." "Why?" She scoffed. "Because I knew you'd screw it up. You couldn't even clean your room." "What? I was supposed to let you waste someone's money on some fantasy you drop out of in a semester? You never even gave me the chance." "I gave you life," she said, voice rising. "And I gave you 18 years. That's more than I got from my parents." "You didn't give me anything," I said, stepping forward. You took everything. And you still are. But not for long." She narrowed her eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a promise." And with that, I turned and walked away. I could feel her eyes on me the whole time. But I didn't look back. Not once. That was the breaking point. The last time I saw her face to face. But it wasn't the last time she'd hear from me. Because from that moment on, I stopped surviving. And I started planning. I'd like to say that after confronting my mom, something inside me shifted right away, that I walked off into some metaphorical sunrise, head high, heart strong, already halfway to a better life. But that's not what happened. What happened was, I fell apart. Not on the outside. On the outside, I kept doing what I needed to do. Showed up for work. Sat in class. Nodded through meetings with my case manager. To anyone watching, I looked like any other tired teenager counting down the days till graduation. But inside, I was unraveling. That confrontation with my mom, her coldness, her certainty that I would fail, it didn't just hurt. It hollowed me. Everything I'd been holding together with duct tape and denial came crashing down. The rejection, the betrayal, the way she'd replaced me like I was an old piece of furniture. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how easily she'd taken everything I worked for, not just the scholarship, but the belief that I mattered. And maybe, worst of all, I believed her. For a while at least. I started showing up late to work. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't sleep at night. My mind would loop the same memories over and over. Her telling the neighbors I'd gone to college, the photos of her smiling with my replacement, that damn cake with "Welcome to the family" written across it like a joke. I'd lie there in the shelter bunk, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I would screw everything up. Maybe I was broken. I flunked 2 quizzes in a row. Forgot to bring my gym clothes. Missed a meeting with my counselor. Small things, but they added up. One Friday afternoon, I skipped school altogether. Just couldn't do it. I sat on a bench behind the strip mall near the grocery store and stared at the cracks in the pavement until the sun started to set. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything. I just sat there, thinking, I can't keep this up. I can't keep pretending I'm okay. That was the lowest point. My rock bottom. But funny thing about rock bottom, it's quiet. No one's cheering. No one's watching. No one's waiting for you to climb out. You just sit there with your pain until eventually you either give up or you decide to move. And that's what I did. One small move. I called Mrs. Whitaker. I don't even remember dialing her number. I just remember her voice on the other end. Calm. Warm. Like someone flipping on a light in a dark room. I told her everything. Not just about my mom, but about how I felt. The weight. The exhaustion. The shame. I expected her to give me a pep talk. Something about how I was strong and capable and all that. Instead, she just said, Jason, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. And then she showed up. She started checking in every few days. Nothing big, just little texts. Did you eat today? Need help with homework? Want me to proofread that essay? Those tiny lifelines started pulling me out of the fog, reminding me that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible. That spring, something began to shift. I stopped thinking about proving my mom wrong and started thinking about proving myself right. That I was worth more than how she treated me. That I could build something. Not out of spite. Not out of rage. But out of a quiet, stubborn belief that I deserved better. I poured myself into school. Started showing up early. Stayed late. Asked questions. Took notes like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Education wasn't just a way out for me. It was a lifeline. It was the first thing I had that belonged only to me. And I was good at it. Not in a flashy, valedictorian way, but in a steady, consistent, undeniable way. My grades climbed back up. I started tutoring other students in math and econ, not for the money, though it helped, but because I liked it. It made me feel smart, useful, like I had something to offer. At night, I'd stay after hours at the youth center, reading articles about small businesses, investment strategies, tax loopholes, anything that gave me an edge. I was obsessed, not with getting rich, but with getting free. I wanted to understand the world in a way my mom never did. I wanted to make choices she never gave me. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to rise. One of the shelter volunteers, Malik, noticed how much time I spent in the computer lab. He was this older guy, ex-military, real no-nonsense. One day, he sat down next to me and said, "You got hustle, kid. You ever think about starting your own thing?" That idea stuck in my head like a splinter. My own thing. At first, I laughed it off. What could I possibly start? I was broke, living in a shelter. No contacts. No fancy degree. But Malik kept pushing. He told me how he used to flip used cell phones on Craigslist. How he started with nothing but a cracked iPhone and turned it into a side hustle that paid his rent. It's not about starting big, he said. It's about starting smart. So I started. I noticed people at the shelter always needed basics. Socks, toothpaste, razors, chargers, but no one wanted to waste time going across town to the cheap stores. So I found a dollar store near my job that gave small bulk discounts. Bought a handful of items. Resold them for 50 cents more in the shelter common room. People paid for the convenience. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That tiny micro business turned into a weekly thing. I kept records, tracked profits, learned what people wanted, when, and how to price things. I reinvested every dollar. Bought used books on sales strategy and customer psychology. Watched YouTube videos about drop shipping and affiliate marketing. By summer, I had a binder full of notes and a spreadsheet that made me feel like a Wall Street analyst. More importantly, I had confidence. Real, earned confidence. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing you built something from scratch and no one can take it away from you. When graduation rolled around in June, I didn't invite anyone. No mom. No distant relatives. Just me in a cap and gown, walking across a stage with a piece of paper that said I mattered. That I made it. Mrs. Whitaker was in the front row. Malik was there too, clapping like he'd raised me himself. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you find when everything else falls apart. After the ceremony, I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the crowd, realizing that I'd done it. I'd survived. I'd rebuilt. And I wasn't done yet. That fall, I enrolled in a community college. Not Millstone Tech. They'd given my scholarship away months ago. But it didn't matter. I got financial aid. Applied for every grant and local scholarship I could find. Took out a small loan. And I kept working. Evenings at the store, weekends running my little supply stand at the shelter. I moved into a subsidized student housing unit. Tiny but mine. First night there, I slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by textbooks and boxes of dollar store toothpaste. And I was happy, because I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, grade by grade. By the time I turned 19, I was running an online shop out of my dorm. Nothing fancy, just curated care packages for students and shelter programs. Basic needs bundled together. I'd personalize them, add handwritten notes, even offer discounts to shelters I'd once stayed at. Orders started coming in. Word spread. I wasn't just rebuilding my life anymore. I was building something bigger. And yet, through all of it, the grades, the business, the new life, there was one thing I couldn't shake. The promise I made to myself. That one day, she would regret everything. I didn't obsess over it the way I used to, but it lingered, like a low hum in the back of my mind. Because while I was rising, I knew something else was happening. Something on the other side of town. Something about to collapse. The thing about revenge is it doesn't come to you. You have to build it. Slowly, brick by brick. Not in a movie-style way, where the protagonist just magically levels up, gets a haircut, and launches some dramatic confrontation that changes everything overnight. No, real revenge, the kind that stings, takes patience, timing, discipline. You don't get even by yelling louder or throwing punches. You win by being so successful, so undeniable, that the person who wronged you has no choice but to see you, acknowledge you, and regret every single choice that brought them to that moment. And I was getting closer. By the time I turned 20, my side hustle had grown legs. What started as a box of care products and snacks in a shelter common room had become a modest but steady e-commerce business. I called it Packlight. Simple, clean branding. Care packages tailored to college students, low-income families, and shelters. I'd built a Shopify store, learned basic SEO, and invested every dollar I earned back into stock and site design. But it wasn't just about money. It was about building something that no one could take away from me. I kept it all quiet. No bragging. No posts. Not even my professors knew the full scope. I didn't want eyes on me until I was ready. I still remembered the look on my mom's face when I told her she'd stolen my scholarship. That cold, smug smirk that said, "You'll never be anything without me." I wanted to burn that image out of my brain. And the only way to do it was to make her eat her words. But for that to happen, I needed more than success. I needed a plan. And strangely enough, it started with Tyler. I didn't care much about him at first. He was just the pawn in all of this, a new warm body my mom could manipulate, parade around, and guilt trip into loyalty. I figured he'd disappear like everyone else in her life eventually. But then I got an email from a girl I used to go to high school with. We weren't close, just had a few classes together. She messaged me randomly one afternoon, subject line, "Hey, is this your cousin?" There was a screenshot attached. A Reddit thread. One of those anonymous community pages for our hometown. The post title, "Tyler from Unit 14 sees stealing phones from gym lockers again." I opened it with a sinking feeling. The thread had a few blurry photos. Someone caught him red-handed going through a locker at a local gym. Another comment mentioned how he'd been banned from 2 different youth centers. A third claimed he tried to sell stolen AirPods at the mall kiosk. It didn't take much digging after that. A quick search of his full name on Facebook led me to a few public posts, angry rants from people who'd been scammed, PayPal chargebacks, lost dog fundraisers that seemed off. I even found an old post from Florida. "Watch out for this kid, known for stealing laptops from schools." I sat back in my chair and just stared at the screen. It was all so familiar. This was who she kicked me out for. This was the person she gave my bed, my room, my life to. Suddenly, I understood something I hadn't before. My mom didn't just betray me. She gambled. She wanted to rewrite her narrative, become the good, loving guardian to a troubled kid. The kind of person she could show off to neighbors and post about online. But she was too arrogant to see that she was repeating the same pattern. That gave me my first opening. Not revenge yet. Information. I started watching Tyler. From a distance, online only. Social media, local Reddit pages, group chats from high school alumni. He was messy, the kind of kid who bragged about the dumbest things. He'd post photos with wads of cash, claiming it was from legit side hustles. He made TikToks flexing in sneakers I recognized from my old closet. The ones I saved up for junior year. The ones I thought I lost in a move. He was walking around in pieces of my past, smiling like he earned them. That's when I started the burner. Fake Reddit account. New Instagram profile. Totally untraceable. I used it to quietly comment on threads, stir conversations about Tyler, ask loaded questions. Nothing obvious, just enough to make people curious. The more he posted, the more I nudged the narrative. I didn't need to fabricate anything. His own history was the bomb. I just handed people the match. But the real opportunity came from something unexpected. I was working a shift at the grocery store on a sleepy Sunday when I saw her. My mom. She walked in like nothing had changed. Holding a basket, hair curled, cheap perfume trailing behind her like a cloud of denial. She didn't see me. I was bagging groceries at the end of the express lane. But I saw her, and I saw who she was with. A man. Tall. Late 40s maybe. Suit jacket over jeans. Looked expensive, but casual, like someone trying to look humble and missing by a mile. They weren't holding hands, but the body language was unmistakable. She was laughing, twirling her hair, doing that fake giggle she used when she wanted something. They walked right past me. She didn't even glance up. I asked the cashier next to me, "Do you know who that guy is?" "Oh, him," she said. "That's Rick. Comes in all the time. Owns a few of those tech stores downtown. I think he's loaded." Rick. That gave me my second opening. I waited until she left, then asked to take my break early. Stepped outside, pulled out my phone, searched Rick Tech Store hometown. Boom. There he was. Rick Salvatore, owner of 3 small electronics stores in our county. Did local commercials. Had a LinkedIn. Even had an Instagram. Mostly pictures of the stores, a couple of photos at trade shows, and recently her. Buried in the feed was a post from Valentine's Day. A photo of a dinner plate, candlelit table, and just visible at the edge of the frame, her hand. The ring she always wore. Caption, "Best V-Day I've had in years." Lucky man. That confirmed it. She'd landed someone new. Someone with money. Which meant she had something to lose. And that was my third opening. I spent the next 2 months building the pieces of what would become the setup. First, I revamped Packlight. Got serious. Registered the business. Opened a P.O. box. Applied for a micro grant from a nonprofit that helped youth entrepreneurs, and got it. I used the funds to invest in inventory, automate parts of my fulfillment process, and even hire a part-time web designer from a freelancing site to polish the site and rebrand. Then I created a special section on the site, Packlight Partners, a program for businesses to sponsor care packages for youth shelters, complete with branded thank you notes, social media shoutouts, and a community partner badge. Guess who I reached out to? Rick's Stores. I used a fake name, posed as the marketing manager, sent a formal pitch via email, complete with mock-ups. I knew he'd bite. He was exactly the kind of guy who wanted to look generous. We went back and forth for a week. Eventually, I got a confirmation. "This looks great. I'm happy to donate some accessories and be featured. Just keep our brand visible. My girlfriend loves this kind of community work." His girlfriend. Of course. She'd spun some lie about how she used to work with kids or ran support groups or whatever other garbage she fed him. And now, she was about to be publicly linked to my company, the company built by the son she abandoned. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I needed one more thing. The receipts. So I started collecting them. Every Reddit thread. Every photo of Tyler holding stolen goods. Every comment from someone who claimed he owed them money. Every blurry gym security photo. Every Twitter rant. Every TikTok with flexing cash. I created a Google Drive folder, organized by date, with captions and sources. Then I backed it up 6 different ways. And finally, the centerpiece. I ordered one of my own care packages. But this one had something special inside. Not just toothpaste and snacks, but a typed letter, signed with my full name, addressed to Rick. Inside, I thanked him for supporting youth like me, and mentioned how I'd started the business after being kicked out of my home at 18, with no support from my family. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. I let the timeline, the tone, and the emotional weight speak for itself. I wanted him to ask questions. I wanted her to sweat. Because now, I had everything. Proof of her betrayal. A platform she couldn't ignore. And a reputation she was just starting to build. One that I could crumble with a single truth. But I wasn't going to drop the bomb just yet. I wanted her to see me. Truly see me. And when she did, when it finally hit her who I'd become, what I'd built from the ashes she left behind, that's when the real revenge would begin. Revenge isn't loud. It doesn't show up in a blaze of glory or a screaming match in a parking lot. The best kind of revenge walks in quietly, takes its seat at the table you built, and waits patiently as your enemies realize they're dining on their own consequences. And that's exactly what I did. Once Rick agreed to be featured as a Packlight partner, I waited 3 weeks before the campaign launched. Just enough time to set the stage. I updated the site, made it look professional, minimalistic with clean lines, soft colors, and big text thanking Rick's store for sponsoring care packages for underprivileged youth. And then I added one final touch, a spotlight story on the homepage. A personal essay, titled, Kicked Out at 18. Now I'm sending help to kids like me. It was short, no more than 600 words. No names, no sobbing dramatics. Just my voice, calm, clear, and devastatingly honest. I told the story of the morning I turned 18. The packed bag, the closed door, the realization that I wasn't loved, just tolerated until I was no longer legally required. I wrote about sleeping in a laundromat, missing my scholarship offer, and discovering I'd been replaced in my own home. I didn't beg for pity. I just told the truth. And at the end of the essay, I thanked our new business partners, including a local electronics company owned by a man who reminds me there are kind, generous adults out there. I knew my mom would see it. Rick followed the business's Instagram, and I'd tagged him in the post that shared the article. It started gaining traction fast. Small accounts, nonprofit blogs, and a couple local influencers reposted it. The shelter I used to stay at even left a comment saying how proud they were of me. And then, 3 days later, I got the message. From Rick. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. Rick. Hey, Jason. Just read your story on the site. Powerful stuff. Forgive me for asking, but is your mom's name Denise? I stared at the screen, heart pounding. And then I typed. Me. Yeah, she is. He didn't reply. Not immediately. But I knew I'd just tossed a grenade into his carefully curated image of her. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Voicemail. It was her. Her voice was breathy, nervous. Jason, I saw what you wrote. I think we need to talk. Please. I didn't respond. Another voicemail came the next day. Then a third, each more frantic than the last. By the end of the week, the Packlight Instagram was flooded with new followers, many commenting about the story, sharing their own experiences. But a very specific few, had something else to say. Hey, is that the same Denise from Unit 14C? Wait, she's the mom? Wow, kicked him out for Tyler? That lady was always shady. Knew it. And then someone, not me, posted a link in the comments to the Reddit threads about Tyler. The gym thefts, the scams, the phone locker drama. It spread quickly. You can't contain that kind of fire once it's lit. Within days, people were putting it all together. The woman who claimed to be a selfless guardian of a troubled teen? She'd kicked out her own son and covered up the crimes of a kid with a growing reputation for stealing. Rick reached out again, this time with less curiosity and more heartbreak. Rick, she told me you ran away, said you were trouble, that she saved your cousin from an abusive home. I believed her. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. He pulled his sponsorship quietly. No drama, no headlines. But I noticed that all her photos disappeared from his Instagram, one by one, over the course of a few days. And then, the fallout. It started when Tyler got arrested. Not for the gym thefts. For something stupider. He tried to sell stolen laptops on Facebook Marketplace, using his real profile. The cops traced the serial numbers back to a community center that had been robbed the week before. He was caught on camera. Full face, full name. He was picked up 2 days before my 21st birthday. And guess who showed up on the local police blotter? You guessed it. Denise Williams, 46 years old, charged with obstruction and possession of stolen property. Turns out, when the cops came knocking, she tried to hide the laptops in the crawl space. Said they were donations, and she didn't know they were stolen. They didn't buy it. Her mugshot was grainy. She looked older. Tired. That fake confidence drained from her face like she'd just realized the party was over and the check had bounced. I saved the photo. Not to gloat. Just to remind myself that karma is real. Even if it's slow. Rick cut ties with her. I heard from someone at the store that he was furious. She tried to play the victim. Said I was lying. Said the internet had twisted the story. But the receipts were public. The truth didn't need my defense. It stood on its own. She lost the apartment soon after. Couldn't pay rent without Rick. The electronics stores stopped donating to her causes. She tried to crowdfund for legal fees, but it flopped. Someone linked my essay under the GoFundMe. The goal never cracked $100. I never visited her. Never called. I didn't need to. Because I'd already won. Not by shouting. Not by slamming doors. But by living well. By building something she couldn't touch. by becoming exactly the kind of man she swore I'd never be. Today, I run Packlight full-time. We ship nationwide, partner with shelters in 4 states. I've spoken at conferences, mentored teens who've been through worse than I have. My story made it to a few podcasts, even got picked up by a nonprofit documentary crew. But I don't tell this story to inspire pity. I tell it to remind people. Sometimes the people who should protect you won't. Sometimes family isn't blood. And sometimes the best revenge isn't loud at all. It's quiet, measured, and served ice cold, with tracking, delivery, and a handwritten thank you note. My name is Mason. I'm 31. And the morning my wife stood on our porch and told me I'd always been a failure, the coffee in my hand tasted like it had come from a rusty faucet. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She looked at the realtor's flyer in her other hand. High-gloss paper with staged photos of a kitchen I tiled on my knees after midnight. "You're holding me back," she added, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear like she was adjusting a crown. "I'm filing today." Then she laughed. Not a wild laugh. A small, confident breath. The kind you exhale when you've rehearsed the scene in your head a dozen times and already pictured the applause. I didn't say anything clever. I just stared at the flyer and thought about the grout lines. The tiny imperfections I knew were there, but nobody else could see. It struck me that marriage felt like those grout lines. You do the work bent over, careful and patient, but the first person to judge it is the one who won't even kneel long enough to look closely. If you ask my wife, ex-wife, technically, though the paperwork would drag, when our marriage started to fail, she'd say it was the day I decided I wanted to own boring things. Not flashy businesses, not an app or a startup. Boring. I liked storage units. I liked vending machines. I liked the stale smell of a small office at midnight while I figured out why the soda machine in the municipal building ate quarters. I liked contracts. The short ones I could renegotiate in a year and the long ones that quietly paid the same every month like a heartbeat. If you grow up without a safety net, you fall in love with steady rhythms. When we got married at 26, I was still working maintenance at a mid-rise apartment building. I fixed washers, cleared drains, drove an old Civic with the clear coat peeling like sunburn. I also had a second phone full of notes, client leads, city auction dates, old warehouses with broken gate motors, and a list of every used snack machine within 3 counties. She knew about the notebook and rolled her eyes. My husband and his big business, she'd say at dinners with her family, swirling a glass of wine. Her mother would ask if my business came with benefits or just grime. "He's scrappy," my wife would say, patting my knee like I was a rescue pet. Everyone would laugh. I learned to smile. I learned to eat quickly. One Saturday, I woke to the sound of a drill and found her brother, Chase, putting holes into the wall for a floating shelf he bought for our living room. He needed to prove he could do something without me, he said, since some of us have real shoulder strength, not just spreadsheet strength. The shelf fell in slow motion an hour later when he put a stack of cookbooks on it. I cleaned the drywall dust with a wet cloth and a tight jaw while he and my wife watched a home renovation show and made comments about real contractors. I fixed the wall and installed the shelf properly when they went out for frozen yogurt, then listened to my wife brag to her mother that Chase had finally learned to use a level. I never cared much about credit. I cared about outcomes. I'd drive to the vending machine route after dinner, sleeves rolled, counting quarters in the passenger seat while the Civic's vents coughed warm plastic. I grew the route from 6 machines to 32 in 2 years and sold it to a regional operator for a neat profit. Then I rolled that into a foreclosure on a small strip of storage units off the interstate. 39 doors with dented roll-ups and weeds out front. The first time I stood in the gravel lot at dusk, keys heavy in my pocket, I felt like I'd found a choir no one else could hear. My wife didn't come to see them. She went with her mother to a spa that weekend. "I'll come by when it looks like a business, not a junkyard," she said, waving a lime green nail file. I hired a crew to resurface the asphalt, replaced the locks, upgraded lighting, installed a motion camera, and ran a special for teachers and traveling nurses. Within 3 months, occupancy jumped. Within a year, it was a waiting list. My wife didn't notice, or she pretended not to. She was building a presence online, yoga, skincare, brand collaborations that occasionally sent her free products and a small check if she posted a video within a 24-hour window. She liked lighting, softboxes, matching storage bins. She liked saying "we" when she meant "I," and When she meant you. I kept wearing my steel-toe boots. I kept the Civic. I kept the habit of picking up loose screws wherever I walked. You learn to collect things that can put holes in you later. Whenever her family gathered for birthdays or random Tuesdays that her mother deemed family nights, the conversation turned to jobs and apartments and travel. Mason works. What is it again? Her mother would ask, slicing chicken with slow precision. Facilities, my wife would answer. Maintenance. But he's thinking of starting something someday. Then they'd pivot to Chase's plans, his new sales job that came with an expensive-looking name badge, his vision board, his mentor who used words like conquer and crush. They'd talk about Hawaii or lake houses or a certain brand of countertop like it had a personality. I'd say little, help clear plates, and book a 6 a.m. meeting the next morning with a contractor who liked early starts. If you're wondering why I married someone who talked to me like that, I've asked myself the same question. At first, she was kind. At first, she said she loved that I didn't pretend. She told me I was steady. That word meant something to me. Until steady started to sound like stagnant. Until every time I said no to another weekend trip or a new subscription box, she said I was thinking small. The first real crack, one I could feel, was our 3rd anniversary dinner. We went to a trendy place with plants hanging from the ceiling like we were eating in a greenhouse. She ordered something with edible flowers. I told her I was closing on a second storage property, smaller, across town, 23 units and a metal office the size of a closet. It's a good price, I said. Careful, the way you hold a glass partway through a long walk. We'll be tight for a bit, but the numbers work. She looked at me, then at the waiter. He means he wants us to keep eating at home forever, she said, smiling. Do you know he still drives a car from college? The waiter laughed politely. I remember the prickle at the base of my neck, the unsaid thought that rose and then sat back down. We're supposed to be on the same team. And then came the credit card bill. I found it on the kitchen island under a stack of brand mailers. A card I didn't know about, with my name. Gifts for her mother from both of us, a weekend for girls' wellness, and a glossy white coffee table I had to assemble at midnight while she filmed a video about intentional living. I confronted her, quietly, because loud hadn't worked. She shrugged. You can afford it, she said, almost bored. What's the point of building a life if your life looks like a workshop? I canceled the card. She cried to her mother. Her mother called me a controlling minimalist and said real men buy things that shine. I went to counseling alone. The therapist had kind eyes and a plant he watered between sessions. You speak like a man who's always picking up after other people's messes, he said. Is that something you learned or something you chose? I left with homework. Try asking for appreciation directly. I did. I asked my wife if she could stop making jokes about my work at family dinners. I asked if we could set a budget for her content creation so I wasn't the one smoothing every edge afterward. She looked at me like I'd asked her to move to a cave. You're jealous, she said. Just admit it. You want what I have. I didn't, and that somehow made it worse. The day she filed, she did it with a performance. Papers served at noon when I got home to swap boots for clean sneakers. Her mother waited in the car, engine running like a getaway. You've never provided the lifestyle I deserve, she said gently, as if we were discussing the weather. I married potential. Potential didn't show up. I stared at the ring light still set up in our living room. She had filmed a brand pep talk that morning about gratitude. I hired a lawyer who didn't have a glossy office. He wore scuffed wingtips and kept a candy dish full of peppermints. He listened more than he spoke. When I finished laying it out, storage units, vending machines sold, small contracts with the city for power washing, a recent quiet buy-in to a partner's laundromat, he tapped his pen and asked one question. Has she seen what you file? I told him she hadn't. We filed separately. She didn't ask, and I didn't volunteer. You're going to get painted as a man with means hidden behind a dirty shirt, he said, not unkindly. Your best protection is sunlight. Full disclosure. Every contract, every LLC, every asset, every dollar. Don't posture. Don't be clever. Be exact. He handed me a checklist that looked like a grocery list written by a machine. Bank accounts, K-1s, leases, insurance policies, the works. Also, he added, stop fixing things at her family's house. I brought boxes to his office. Actual boxes. I sat cross-legged on my living room floor at midnight and labeled files with dates. I included the worst details alongside the best. The small emergency loan I took one winter for a roof when a tenant's unit flooded, the ugly tax bill the year I mistimed a sale, the weeks I paid myself less because the asphalt contractor ran over schedule. I added the contracts that represented future profit, not just present cash. A 5-year renewal with the city for grounds cleaning. A signed letter of intent from a developer who wanted part of my interstate lot for a billboard. Documentation for the partnership that owned our small laundromat. Old machines, reliable coins, steady earnings that smoothed stormy months. It wasn't flashy. It was a map of boredom built into something sturdy. The temporary hearing arrived. She came in a silk blouse with a sharp collar and a lipstick color that looked like confidence. Her mother sat behind her, spine straight, a small smile sitting on her face like a brooch. Chase came too, wearing a suit he borrowed from a friend, hovering in the doorway trying to look like an ally and a witness at once. My side of the room held my lawyer and the box I had carried in myself because I don't like trusting handles on old cardboard. Her attorney was bright and polished, the kind who says your first name like he's known you since childhood. He told the judge that my wife had supported me through years of experimentation and deserved compensatory lifestyle support and immediate temporary alimony. He called my businesses hustles. He gestured at my shoes when he said the word. Appearance is not a crime, my lawyer said dryly when it was his turn. Books are. The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to sharpen her eyes, asked for disclosures. We'll review in chambers, she said, but I'll glance at the highlights now to set temporary orders. My wife's attorney slid forward a neat binder. My lawyer stacked our files and a thumb drive on the table like a man setting down lumber, then slid over a summary sheet that began with a number my wife had never seen. I caught her glance at it. A small, involuntary tick at the corner of her mouth. Then she smirked again, dismissive, as if the columns were just words on paper. Her mother leaned forward like a hawk sighting something in a field. Chase shifted, whispering, "That's not real. He can't have that." The judge read silently. She flipped a page. She looked up at me, then at my wife. Then she reached for my wife's binder and set it next to our stack. "Mrs. Hart," she said calmly, "your counsel asserts a certain picture of your husband's finances. The disclosures in front of me paint a different one, not only in present income, but in assets and premarital holdings." My wife's attorney interrupted, lightly, saying something about lifestyle and expectations and future earning potential on her side, and lack of transparency on mine. My lawyer lifted a finger. "Respectfully, Your Honor, we filed sworn statements for every entity and provided tax returns for 5 years, including K-1s and schedules. There is also a trust established before the marriage, funded by proceeds from assets sold prior to the union, with a clear paper trail." He said it with no flourish. He sounded like someone reading a weather report. My wife shot me a look then, sharp, puzzled, a ripple under smooth water. It was the first time she looked at me instead of through me. I remembered all the nights I drove the empty streets, counting the hours by the glow of convenience store signs. I remembered how many times I had wanted to say, "I am building something for us, and I know it's not pretty, but it is real." Instead, I had said things like, "Trust me." And when that didn't work, I stopped saying anything. The judge tapped the stack with the back of her pen. "For temporary orders," she said, "we need clarity, not conjecture. We will establish support based on actual need and on evidence, not on aspiration." She looked at me again. It wasn't a soft look, but it wasn't unkind. "Mr. Hart, your disclosures indicate multiple revenue streams, some pass-through, some fixed, some with significant depreciation affecting taxable income." She turned another page. "And your personal monthly spending is frugal." She said the last word carefully, as if it were uncommon in the room. My wife's mother whispered, "Impossible," to no one in particular. My wife folded her arms, face rigid, eyes locked on the judge like force alone could change numbers. The judge closed the folder halfway and leaned back. "Before I said anything," she said, "I want one question answered plainly." She looked at my wife. "You have stated that your husband has failed to provide you a reasonable lifestyle and that you supported him while he pursued inconsistent ventures. Is that your position?" My wife lifted her chin. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "He never aimed higher. He never gave me the life we planned." "And Mr. Hart," the judge said, turning to me, Is it your testimony that you have contributed steadily to the household and that your financial growth has been consistent, documented, and largely separate from speculative risk? My throat felt suddenly dry. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I have records of everything. That was true. The neat kind of true that either saves you or exposes you completely. The judge nodded once, as if that answer synced with something she'd already concluded. She lifted the summary sheet again and tapped the first line with her pen. Then I am going to read one number into the record, she said, so we can have an honest starting point. She paused. The courtroom hummed faintly. Air vents, shoes shifting, pens being held a little tighter. My wife's attorney leaned forward, ready. My wife's mother tilted her head, a smile tightening, sure the number would be small enough to scoff at. The judge cleared her throat. Her eyes scanned the page. I felt the floor widen and then narrow under my boots, a balance beam laid over old years. In the corner of my eye, I saw my wife look quickly at me again, just once, like a reflex she couldn't control. The judge lifted the first page to make sure the figures aligned with the attachments, and then looked up, voice level, but carrying to the back row. This, she said, is Mr. Hart's disclosed net worth. Then she said the number. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough that even the bailiff's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. I felt something strange as she spoke. No surge of triumph, no flare of vindication, just the odd, weightless feeling you get when the elevator stops and your body keeps moving a fraction of a second longer. My wife's face didn't move at first. It was almost impressive how still she kept it. Then the smirk dissolved, not dramatically, not like in the movies. It dissolved the way frost does when the sun finally finds it, from the edges inward, reluctant, and then gone. Her attorney blinked 3 times in quick succession. Her mother's hand, resting on her handbag, tightened until the leather creaked. Chase made a small sound, a half laugh that got lost somewhere between his throat and his teeth. I didn't look at any of them for more than a second. I kept my eyes on the judge because I knew from 100 little moments in my life that looking around while a room recalibrates is how you get dizzy. The judge, for her part, didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked like she'd expected the number and wanted to see what the people attached to it would do. We will proceed on the basis of the evidence before us, she said evenly, sliding the summary sheet back on top of the stack. For temporary orders, I am setting an interim arrangement that reflects documented income and reasonable expenses. Neither party is permitted to dissipate marital assets. No large purchases. No transfers over $5,000 without mutual consent or court permission. Discovery will continue. She said it like a list she'd said 1,000 times, and maybe she had. But every item hit like a small gavel. No dissipating assets. My wife swallowed, eyes down. Her attorney recovered the fastest. Your Honor, he said, smooth again, we appreciate the court's thoroughness. We would like to enter, for the record, the lifestyle to which Mrs. Hart became accustomed during the marriage and the sacrifices she made to support Mr. Hart's career aspirations. My lawyer stood without haste. We also appreciate the court's thoroughness, he said, and we will be submitting evidence that the lifestyle in question was largely aspirational, curated for social media, and financed, in significant part, by undisclosed revolving credit opened in Mr. Hart's name without his knowledge. He paused a heartbeat. We have the statements. I hadn't asked him to say that out loud. We had agreed to keep that piece as leverage in discovery, not theater. But as soon as the words left his mouth, I saw why he did it. My wife's head lifted fast. Her mother froze. Chase looked at the floor. The judge didn't change expression, but she wrote something on her notepad with a neat, short motion. The hearing moved on. Dates, deadlines, next steps. The judge set a schedule for depositions and a deadline for financial affidavits. She reminded both sides that sworn statements are not suggestions. She made a point of saying that any party found to have misrepresented material facts would be sanctioned. It was clinical, procedural, and yet every sentence felt personal because all of it lived inside the walls I used to call home. When she adjourned, the sound of chairs scraping the floor was louder than the gavel. We filed out in a slow knot. In the corridor, the courthouse air felt cooler, less staged. My lawyer touched my elbow lightly. Good day, he said under his breath, the way a coach might tell a runner that their time was solid, not world-class. Don't gloat. Don't speak to them. He meant my wife's family. I nodded. They spoke to me anyway. Her mother stepped into my path with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You hid," she said softly. "You hid everything. That's not what family does." She said family like an ornament. I let the words pass by me. My wife stood a step behind her, arms crossed, face controlled. "You could have told me," she said. That landed. Not because it was fair, but because it was a truth pointed in the wrong direction. I could have told her, and she could have listened, and both of us chose predictable roles instead. "I filed taxes," I said finally, keeping my voice low. "I left my paperwork in plain sight. I asked you to look at contracts and you laughed." I tried. The last two words came out more tired than I meant. I expected a comeback, a deflection, a line about my boots or my car. What I didn't expect was the flicker in her eyes, the quick flash of something that might have been regret or might have been calculation. Chase saved her from answering. "So you're rich now," he blurted, not caring that we were in a hallway with strangers walking around us. "And you still dress like a janitor." He grinned at his own bravery. "Must be nice, conning the system." My lawyer stepped between us without touching anyone. "We're done for today," he said, calm as a metronome, and steered me toward the elevators. Back in his office, we sat with the door closed while the city noise rubbed against the windows. He took off his glasses and set them on a legal pad. "She's going to pivot," he said. "The temporary shock will wear off. Expect a narrative about hidden wealth and emotional neglect. Expect friends and family testimonials about how she held the household together while you were allegedly off chasing coins. Expect discovery requests for everything, including your middle school report cards." "I kept everything," I said. "You saw the boxes." "I did," he said. "And I saw the one thing missing, acknowledgement." He held up a hand before I could ask what he meant. "Not from her. From you. You did the work in the dark for years. You were okay with that. But a part of you also wanted her to see you. That part is loud today. If you let it drive, you'll make mistakes. You'll over-explain. You'll send a text you regret. Don't. Stay boring. Boring wins cases like this." I took a peppermint from the dish and turned it in my fingers until the wrapper squeaked. "What about the credit cards?" "We will handle it," he said. "Carefully. If we push too hard too fast, her attorney will move to paint it as financial control or paranoia. We'll subpoena the statements we don't have, call the bank's fraud team, and keep our powder dry. Also, I need you to tell me something you haven't yet." I looked up. He waited. "The trust," he said. "You mentioned it was funded with proceeds from assets before the marriage. You also said your grandfather left you a small piece of land out by the river, floodplain, worth more on paper than in practice. We listed it. Fine. What you didn't say is why the trust instruments are written with survivorship conditions that trigger on events other than death." I read every line. "Someone older taught you how to build fire breaks." I thought of my grandfather's handwriting, block letters on yellow paper. He was a carpenter who spoke 5 different ways of saying measure twice. When I was 15, he told me a story about a friend whose family came apart in court. "People don't change when they're hungry," he'd said. "They change when there's pie on the table." He showed me how to put gates and fences no one notices until they need to move cattle. "My grandfather didn't leave much," I said. "But he left tools." The lawyer nodded like I'd answered a different question. "Well," he said, "the tools are working." The first week after the hearing was quiet in an unsettling way, like the space after a thunderclap when your ears are still ringing. I went to the properties early and stayed late. I replaced a dented roll-up door myself because I needed to feel a steel panel give under a mallet. I made deposits and logged receipts and changed the bulbs in the motion lights because the flicker made me itch. I ate at the diner where the waitress calls everyone Han and never asks what you're working on because she's got her own overtime to think about. I slept some. Then the request started. Her attorney sent interrogatories with questions that felt less like inquiries and more like accusations written in polite grammar. Provide every password you have used in the last 5 years. Provide a list of every person to whom you have spoken about your business. Provide documentation of all gifts given to any person in the last 7 years. Provide your journals. Provide your notebooks. Provide your budget for clothing. The last one would have been funny if it didn't come attached to a subpoena. My lawyer returned their volley with our own. Provide all social media income statements. Provide tax returns for the last 5 years. Provide bank statements for all accounts under your name or for your benefit. Provide any and all credit applications made in the last 5 years, including for lines of credit and retail cards. Provide documentation of all expenditures over 1,000 made without Mr. Hart's knowledge. The house felt like a set after a play closed. You can still see where the furniture was, even if it's gone. I took photos of everything, room by room, not because I had to. Our county didn't require a property inventory for temporary orders, but because I needed proof of something that looked like a past. The ring light still stood in the living room, tall and ridiculous. She had taken her camera, her plants, her collection of neutrally colored blankets that all felt the same. I opened a cupboard and found 6 kinds of tea she bought for aesthetic videos and never drank. I closed it and leaned my forehead against the door until the cool, cheap wood steadied me. The first deposition was set for a Tuesday. We sat around a table with a court reporter whose fingers moved like a piano player's. My wife's attorney asked the questions. Mine objected when he needed to. It was tedious and surgical. Describe your income sources. I did. Describe your bookkeeping practices. I did. Why did you keep financial details in separate folders rather than on the kitchen counter? Because grease splatters. Did you ever say to your wife the exact words, "Trust me"? Yes. How many times? Too many. Then it was her turn 2 days later, and I sat behind my lawyer with a legal pad and a pen I never uncapped. Her attorney had coached her well. She answered slowly, carefully, with the kind of softness that makes a microphone lean closer. I supported his dreams, she said. I created a home. I built community online that he benefited from. My lawyer kept his face neutral and his voice even. Do you recall opening any lines of credit in your husband's name? She looked surprised. No. Do you recall authorizing any charges above $500 on any account that you did not disclose to your husband? Not that I remember. He slid a packet across the table. Exhibit 12, he said. The bank statements we had pulled with my authorization, the ones that showed a card issued on my account, mailed to our address, activated via our shared landline. She glanced down once, then looked up as if the papers hurt her eyes. He knew, she said. We discussed it. My chest went cold. We had not. Her attorney objected to the characterization. The court reporter kept typing, unmoved. My lawyer didn't push. He let the denial sit, just long enough for it to cool. Then he moved on to the brand money, the affiliate links, the sponsored posts written as 2-person narratives that featured me as the tidy handyman in the background. Did the companies pay you directly? He asked. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes they sent product. Do you have records of the products received as compensation? No, she said softly. I didn't know I needed to keep receipts for face cream. Afterward, alone in the elevator, my lawyer blew out a slow breath. She'll hold the line, he said. She'll say you consented. We will need something that doesn't rely on your word against hers. He looked at me. Where did she activate that card? I pictured our kitchen, the landline, the way she once joked about old people phones, while using it to call her mother because the cell reception was bad in that corner. Then I pictured the storage office and the small desk phone I'd kept for emergencies. No, the activation record showed our home number. I had asked the bank. That evening, while sorting receipts, I found something I didn't know I had. A small, crumpled square of paper wedged into the seam of a folder. It was a delivery receipt from 2 years ago, a package signed for by my wife, while I was out replacing a busted lock at the East property. The package came from a high-end electronics store. The signer's note said, "Camera lens, gift from brand. Do not bend." The courier had scanned the ID for verification. On the line where billing reference sat, a number I recognized. The last 4 digits matched the card she'd denied existed. There's a moment, when a puzzle clicks, that you feel both relief and dread. Relief because the picture is finally whole. Dread because you can't pretend not to see it anymore. I took a photo of the receipt with the date and the package number and sent it to my lawyer with no commentary, just the image. He replied with a single word. Good. Days turned into a rhythm. Work, paperwork, small meals, sleep. I avoided the places where I might see her by accident. The health food store where they know your name. The coffee shop where we used to sit with laptops and say we were planning. Her mother started posting quotes online about narcissists and financial abuse, and friends we hadn't seen in years commented hearts and stay strong. A cousin sent me a text with no words, just a screenshot of one of those posts and the message bubble left open, as if he wanted me to fill it with something indicting and instead thought better of it. 2 weeks before the next hearing, I got a call from the bank's fraud department. We had opened a case for the unauthorized card as a matter of process, not because I expected a miracle. The woman on the phone spoke in measured tones that suggested she's heard every version of my story 10 times a day. We have reviewed the voice authorization for the card activation, she said. As you know, activation was completed via your home phone. Our system records a brief voice print to match future calls. Would you like a copy of the call under subpoena, or shall we hold pending court order? I sat up straighter at my desk. Is the voice mine? I asked. There was a small pause, the kind a professional leaves so that your heartbeat can catch up. No, she said. It matches a female speaker who later called regarding a shipping issue. We have those calls, too. I emailed my lawyer and went for a walk around the back of the property where the gravel gives way to scrub grass and the highway noise fades into a steady hiss. Wind slipped between the units and made the roll-up doors sing a little. I thought about the first time I held one of those dented keys, how heavy it felt for such a small thing. I thought about the way my wife had looked at me in the hallway after the hearing. Anger, yes, and something else. I thought about the apology we would never give each other. Hers for the way she turned me into a joke to survive rooms where people measured worth by shine. Mine for the way I built a life like a fortress and then expected her to read it as an invitation. The morning of the hearing, my lawyer met me on the courthouse steps with a folder under his arm. We got the call records, he said. We also got something better. He didn't say what. He likes to reveal things in rooms where they count, not in the wind where they blow away. In the courtroom, the same judge took the same bench. The same bailiff said the same words. My wife sat a few chairs down from me in a suit the color of cloud cover. Her mother wasn't there. Chase wasn't either. For the first time since this began, she looked at me for more than a heartbeat. Her face was calm. Her hands twisted a ring she hadn't worn in years, not the wedding band, but something old from college, a thin band with a tiny stone. The judge called our case and asked for updates. My wife's attorney went first, presenting a request for considerable temporary support based on maintaining stability and ensuring Mrs. Hart is not upended during this process. He used phrases like equitable distribution and standard of living. My lawyer waited, then stood and handed the clerk a thin packet. We moved to supplement the record with new information relevant to the court's consideration of credibility and financial conduct, he said. He spoke about voice prints and activation calls, about shipping signatures and the neat alignment of dates. Then he paused, tapped the next page, and looked up. And, Your Honor, he said, we have also received a report from Mr. Hart's accountant concerning a discrepancy in the financial affidavit filed by Mrs. Hart last week. He slid a document only the judge could see. The judge took it without comment and read. I watched the lines in her forehead change shape. My wife's attorney shifted, performing calm. My wife's fingers went still on the little ring. My heart did that elevator thing again, up a fraction, down a fraction, and then holding, waiting for the floor to move. The judge set the paper down with care, almost gently, as if it were a fragile piece of something that could be important later. She looked at my wife, then at her attorney, and when she spoke her voice was just a shade firmer than before. Mrs. Hart, I have a question for you about your affidavit and the source of certain deposits in the 6 months preceding the filing. The room got quiet in a new way, not the procedural quiet of legal process, but the human quiet of an answer being built in real time. Specifically, the judge continued, funds that appear to originate from an account not disclosed on your initial statement. Please explain. My wife swallowed. She glanced at her attorney. He leaned in, whispered, and she nodded once. Her eyelids fluttered and then steadied. When she spoke, her voice was soft enough that the court reporter leaned forward a hair to catch it. Those deposits, she said, were reimbursements from brand collaborations. I must have forgotten to list that account because it was used for business only. She kept her face smooth. The judge watched her like a carpenter watching a beam settle. I see, the judge said. And the brand reimbursements would correspond to invoices, yes? My wife nodded. Then you will have invoices. Another nod. Good, the judge said. Please provide them. My lawyer didn't look at me, but I felt the change in his breathing. He flipped the next page in his folder. Your Honor, he said, we anticipated that explanation and have already subpoenaed the platform used for those brand payments. Their response indicates no reimbursements in the amounts and on the dates listed. What they did provide, however, is an internal note referencing a bank account ending in 1743 as the destination for affiliate payouts. That account is in the name of Mrs. Hart's mother. He let the word stand. No flourish. The judge didn't blink. My wife did. Behind us, a chair creaked. The court reporter's keys clicked faster, then steadied. The judge folded her hands. "Counsel," she said to my wife's attorney. He cleared his throat, the first crack in his polish. "We have not yet had the opportunity to review those materials," he said. "We would request time to confer with our client and, if necessary, amend the affidavit." The judge nodded once. "You will do so by Friday." She looked at my wife, not unkindly, but with a kind of tired gravity. "Mrs. Hart, the court takes the accuracy of affidavits seriously. Misstatements, even accidental, have consequences. I expect your full cooperation." The judge moved on to the rest of the docket with the efficiency of someone folding laundry. Temporary orders would hold. Discovery would deepen. There would be another hearing and another after that, if needed. The system churned, and we were inside it, small figures turning with it whether we liked the motion or not. We stepped back into the corridor. My lawyer touched the folder under his arm like it was a holster. "We're not done," he said. "But the pattern is revealing itself." He studied my face. "You're not celebrating." I shook my head. "It doesn't feel like winning," I said. "It feels like watching a house I built catch a leak and trying to save the beams." He nodded. "That's because you're not a destroyer by nature. Keep that. Let the process do the breaking." Down the hall, my wife stood by the window with her phone in her hand, staring at nothing. A ray of sun cut across the floor and landed on her shoe. She looked, not small, exactly, but thinner than the version of herself that laughed on porches. She turned, noticed me, and for a second something like the first year of our marriage flickered between us. The dinners with too much garlic, the way she used to sit on the counter and dangle her feet while I told stories about rusty gate motors, and she told me about lighting angles. She walked toward me, stopping at a polite distance. "I didn't know the number," she said quietly. There was no sarcasm, no edge, just a sentence. "I know," I said. "I don't know if it would have changed anything." She looked down at her hands. "Me neither." Then, after a beat, "Did you ever think about telling me anyway?" I laughed once, not unkindly. "Every day," I said. And every day I thought, tomorrow, when we're less tired, when the sink isn't full, when the shelf isn't falling, when the jokes aren't happening. And then the days passed, and I started believing it was better to be invisible than to be mocked. She bit her lip. "I didn't know it felt that way." "That's the problem," I said. "We didn't know a lot of things." She nodded and turned as if to go, then stopped. "If my mother," she began, then stopped again, choosing a different route. "The account, it's not what it looks like." She stared at me, waiting to see what I'd do with that. I didn't give her the relief of an easy out or the cruelty of a hard accusation. I waited. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then her attorney called her name. She went. Back at the office, my lawyer finally told me what he'd held back on the steps. He set a thin stack of printouts on the desk. "We pulled the metadata on her affidavit," he said. "It was edited 3 times from an IP address registered to her mother's home. We have the timestamps." He looked at me. "There's a universe where your wife is being steered." He didn't say used. He didn't have to. "If that's the case," he continued, "pushing harder than needed may backfire. Judges notice when a party looks more like a pawn than a queen." I sat with that. I thought about boxes inside boxes, about old lessons from my grandfather about gates and fences. I thought about the difference between winning and burning. I thought about the way my wife's voice sounded when she asked if I ever considered telling her anyway. I thought about my own answer and the truth inside it that made my chest ache in a quiet, steady way. We planned next steps. Subpoenas. A motion to compel production of devices for a limited forensic review. A notice to depose her mother. I drove to the east property at dusk and walked the rows as the lights clicked on one by one, neat halos in the growing dark. Somewhere, a train's horn blew, long and lonesome, the way they do when they cross open roads. I stood there until the horn faded, and the only sound left was the highway hiss. The next morning, an email hit my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was nothing, just a blank line. The body contained a single sentence and an attachment. The sentence said, "You should see this before Friday." The attachment was a photo, grainy, angled, clearly taken with a phone in a hurry, like someone didn't want to be seen. It showed a laptop screen with a draft email open. The sender field was my wife's mother's email. The draft was addressed to my wife's attorney. The first line read, "We need to make sure he never discloses the Henderson option," and then the image cut off mid-sentence as if the photographer had lowered their hand too quickly. I stared at the photo until the edges got sharp again. Henderson. The word meant nothing and everything. I typed the letters into my memory and came up with 2 hits. Henderson Scrap and Salvage, where I'd once bought a row of lockers for the West property, and Henderson Parkway, an old exit off the interstate where a developer had been sniffing around for billboard rights and where, once, over coffee, the manager of a nearby warehouse had told me that a land swap was in the air. I had never used the word option in any paperwork with Henderson anything. That didn't mean someone else hadn't. I forwarded the email to my lawyer with a note, unknown source. Could be a trap, but if not, Friday might be loud. Then I sat back, peppermint unwrapped and forgotten on the desk, and listened to the office clock tick like a rail crossing far off in the night, counting out the seconds between where I stood and the next sound I couldn't yet hear. The morning of the final hearing felt like a storm that had been building for years. I sat outside the courthouse with my lawyer, folder in his lap, and thought about all the roads that led here. The vending machines, the late-night repairs, the jokes at dinner tables, the silences I let grow like ivy on the walls of my marriage. My wife arrived 10 minutes late, her mother at her side like a shadow. They walked in together, heads high, but I noticed the hesitation in her step. She wasn't the same person who once told me I was small-minded while posting another photo about abundance. She looked brittle, like someone who had built her identity on glass shelves that were now trembling under weight. The judge called our case. Both attorneys stood, both spoke in careful tones. The court had already seen the financials, already seen the voice records of the credit card activation, already seen the discrepancies in her affidavit. What remained was the question of intent and division. My lawyer stood first. Your Honor, we are asking the court to recognize the documented pattern, undisclosed accounts, misrepresentation of income, and diversion of funds to a relative's account. My client has been consistent, transparent, and cooperative. He seeks only equitable division under the law and protection of his premarital trust. Then he sat, folding his hands. Her attorney tried to counter with lifestyle, with sacrifice, with emotional support. He spoke about the unseen labor of a spouse, about maintaining a home, about building a presence. But each time he gestured toward her affidavit, the judge's expression grew tighter. When he finished, the silence was louder than his words. Then the judge spoke. The court has considered testimony, evidence, and the credibility of disclosures. She looked directly at my wife. Mrs. Hart, the discrepancies in your filings are serious. While the court recognizes the contributions of non-financial labor in a marriage, it does not excuse dishonesty. You were asked for full disclosure. You did not provide it. Furthermore, evidence indicates deliberate concealment of funds through an account in your mother's name. That undermines your credibility before this court. Her mother shifted uncomfortably, but the judge wasn't done. The law requires fairness. Mr. Hart has demonstrated consistent, documented financial growth and has protected premarital assets appropriately. Those assets will remain his. Marital property will be divided equitably, not equally, given the circumstances. She turned another page. The request for spousal support is denied. Temporary orders will be lifted. The court finds no basis to order alimony when misrepresentation has occurred. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. My wife's face drained of color. Her attorney tried to interject, citing precedent, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. This matter is concluded. Mrs. Hart, you will produce the invoices you claimed within 10 days or face sanction. Mr. Hart, your disclosures are accepted. The marital residence, being primarily funded from your separate accounts, remains yours. Court is adjourned. She struck the gavel. The room erupted into murmurs. My wife stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight. Her mother leaned in to whisper, but my wife didn't move. For the first time in years, she looked small, not because of me, but because the mask she wore had cracked under its own weight. Outside, the sun was sharp, almost mocking after so many gray days. My lawyer clapped my shoulder. You played it the right way, he said. You let the evidence speak. That's why you won. I nodded, though it didn't feel like winning. It felt like survival. It felt like walking out of a burning building with soot on your hands and lungs full of smoke, grateful for the air, but aware of the wreckage behind you. She caught up to me at the bottom of the courthouse steps. No mother, no attorney, just her. "You could have destroyed me," she said quietly. "You didn't." Her voice trembled on the edge of accusation and relief. I looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't have to," I said. "You did that yourself." She flinched, then looked down at her shoes. "Was it ever enough?" she asked. The question was raw, stripped of pride. I thought of the dinners, the garlic, the counters, the late nights, the quiet mornings before the world woke. "It could have been," I said softly. "But we didn't let it be." She turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, as her mother called her from the car. I stood there until they were gone, then breathed deep. For the first time in months, the air didn't taste like iron. In the weeks that followed, life became simple again. I went back to the properties, fixed a leaking gutter, replaced a broken keypad. Tenants waved, kids rode bikes past the units, and the world kept turning. I sold one of the smaller lots at a profit and reinvested in a laundromat across town. My lawyer filed the last of the paperwork, and the decree came in the mail. Formal words sealing the end of something that had already ended long before. One night, I sat on the gravel at the edge of the east property and watched the sunset stain the sky orange and purple. The lights on the units clicked on one by one, steady and unremarkable. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd kept, and everything I'd built with my own hands. My wife had called me a failure. Maybe, to her, I always would be. But the steady hum of the lights, the weight of the keys in my pocket, the quiet knowledge that I had endured without crumbling, those were the measures that mattered. When I stood up, brushed the dust from my jeans, and locked the gate behind me, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like a man who had walked through fire, not with a smirk or a performance, but with quiet steps that led him out the other side. And for me, that was more than enough.